Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek: The Ashes of Eden by William Shatner, with Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens. Read by William Shatner.
On a mountain slope, far above the simple cairn of rocks that was the grave of James T. Kirk, a lone figure stood in meditative silence, a sentinel, keeping faithful watch. His elegant black robes shifted in the twilight breeze of Iridian 3. 3 weeks before this day, Ambassador Spock had never known of this planet's existence. Yet now he knew he would never be free of it. For history recorded that 78 years after James T. Kirk was reported dead, it was on this world that Kirk had reappeared only to die again. Far below Spock, the setting sun drew long shadows from the modest pile of rocks he watched over. In the air above those shadows, 5 points of light sparkled to life. The transporter beams resolved into 5 Starfleet officers. One he knew, William Riker, late of the Starship Enterprise. Riker, with the 4 others, formed the honor guard that would travel with Spock back to Earth for Kirk's official interment, a hero's funeral. On the horizon, the sun set, and the stars shone forth from the gathering dark. The honor guard waited at attention by the grave. If all proceeded according to schedule, far overhead, the starship would be shifting orbits, preparing to lock her transporter on the remains beneath the stones. Logic therefore directed Spock to seek solace not in what might lie ahead, but in what had gone before. A tear slipped down his cheek. Spock watched it fall to the dust of this world, swallowed as if it had never existed, except in his memories. So to his memories now he turned, to the final adventure and the revelation of those last days he had spent with his friend. Kirk didn't look back to the past. He slammed into it running, diving, hitting the volcanic ash of Tycho 4 shoulder first, rolling to cover. Whatever creature dwelt among the ashes of Tycho 4 was now picking off the Farragut's crew, one by one. Kirk snapped open his communicator and heard Captain Garavic's urgent request.
Where are those coordinates, Lieutenant Kirk?
Captain Garavik hadn't beamed back to the Farragut when he had had the chance, before the transporter coils had overloaded. He had stayed with the wounded. Kirk held his bulky tricorder before him like a shield. Scanning now, sir. His eyes darted from the readout to the surrounding terrain and back again. Captain, there's nothing out there.
Stay put and keep scanning, Lieutenant. You've got forward fire control till the main sensors are back in operation.
In standard orbit above Kirk, the Farragut's weapons were at his command. With no sensors to guide them, he was now their targeting system. Somehow, the weight of that responsibility felt good. A distant scream cut through the dusk. A woman. Kirk held his position, heart hammering. A figure ran for his boulder. Kirk quickly checked his tricorder. The figure was human. Anderford Drake. The young lieutenant slid into position beside Kirk, out of breath, laser drawn. That scream! It was Morgan. Even as Kirk felt the shock twist through his chest, he saw the flicker of a smile on Drake's face. Faith Morgan was the Farragut's weapons officer. For the last 3 months, she had shared Kirk's quarters as his lover. Kirk wanted to grind Drake's smirk into the rocks, but he had his orders. There was nothing more he could do for Faith Morgan, but the crew of the Farragut numbered 400. Kirk waved his tricorder in the gloom. Still no readings. Drake clicked through the power levels on his weapon, twisting the stubby barrel completely around to its highest setting. Lasers don't work on it. Drake shook his head. The creature can change its molecular form. Maybe lasers can work on one form, but not another. Kirk rapidly changed the settings on his tricorder and scanned again. Garavik says phasers will destroy it. What does Garavik know? He hasn't done well so far, has he? Kirk focused on his tricorder readings to keep his fist off Drake's jaw. Something spiked on the display. Then an unwelcome fragrance reached out to him, too sweet, overpowering. He heard Garavik's voice come from his communicator.
Lieutenant, where are those readings?
Something moved out by the distant rocks. It was at this moment, in another time, another life, that Lieutenant Kirk froze. Faced with certain death, he hesitated. But not this time. Kirk to Farragut. Target bearing 30 meters, due west, this location. All phaser banks, fire. A heartbeat later, the heavens of Tycho 4 were ripped open by twin lances of blue fire. When the barrage ended, Kirk peered past the edge of the boulder. The creature was gone. We did it, Captain Garrovick. But a wispy tendril of white vapor twisted from the dust cloud like a tornado, forming in reverse, rising along the ionization trail left by the phaser beams. Rising up to the Farragut. Kirk to Farragut. The creature is on an intercept course. Get out of there. The Farragut science officer responded, her voice breaking up in static.
Shields down. Coming in through. Antimatter containment is...
A new star blossomed directly overhead. Kirk stared up at the flickering pinpoint of light. A Constitution-class starship and her crew reduced to one dying star among so many. Now obscured by a slender coil of white vapor, spiraling down from the heavens, coming back to claim them all. Drake laughed beside Kirk. Great instincts, Jimbo. See you in hell. The descending cloud creature was almost on them. Kirk had run out of options. There was only one thing left to do. End program. Then the creature and Drake and Tycho 4 dissolved into a holographic haze, back to the past where they belonged. Was the suit too heavy, sir? The young Starfleet technician waited respectfully for Kirk's answer as Kirk slipped off the bulky encounter helmet he had worn during the simulation. The entire hollow environment encounter rig was too heavy, but Kirk wasn't going to be the one who complained about it. Felt fine. Almost as if I were back in my old uniform. The technician grinned, impressed. So, Captain, now you know what would have happened if you had fired at the cloud creature right away, instead of hesitating the way you really did. If you had fired right away, the cloud creature would have returned to the Farragut, destroyed her, then finished off everyone else on the ground as well. So you did the right thing the first time round. By not firing the phasers right away, the creature only attacked those crew members on the ground. And Garrovick had died because of it. Kirk changed the subject. Should make for a wonderful training device. The technician gave him a bewildered look. Training? I guess. But how about for entertainment? The gaming possibilities alone are endless. Kirk kicked off the heavy feedback boots. You programmed all this for entertainment purposes? Sir, we've programmed almost all your early exploits into the system. This encounter with the cloud creature of Tycho 4 and your destruction of it 11 years later on Stardate 3619.2, more coming online each day. But why? The technician couldn't understand why the question had been asked. Sir, you're a hero. Kirk smiled at the technician. Those exploits were just my job. A job I did a long time ago. And to Kirk, his job seemed over. He had always looked toward the future, toward new challenges, not past accomplishments. But his future was running out. He was a starship captain without a starship, trapped in the present, ready to go nova. And he knew he had to do something about it soon. No one knew who had built the Dark Range platform. The immense space station stretched out like a demented spider's web, coiled around a confusion of life support spheres and cylinders installed by a dozen races over the platform's millennia of service. Once it might have been a transfer point for vast flotillas of starships, but now it was a backwater refueling stop, a starting point for dreamers seeking fortune among the stars, a lair for the smugglers and cutthroats who would steal that fortune from them. Alone it drifted in the dark between the stars, at relative rest in the hinterlands of the Federation's frontier and the Klingon Empire's old regions. Neither the Federation nor the Empire claimed it. No one really cared who had built Dark Range. The cavernous Dark Range cargo bay was so cold that Chekhov was shivering. Beside him, by a stack of modular cargo crates marked with Romulan warning symbols, Uhura pulled her collar up around her neck. After 6 months of being undercover and trying to obtain Klingon weapons illegally, Chekhov and Uhura had struck pay dirt. A one-eyed Klingon named Court had agreed to provide whatever they had credits to buy. They were to meet him in this cargo bay with the credits, so 3 meters away stood a compact young human woman with a data case. Her code name was Jade, but Uhura had dubbed the woman the Banker early on. In Jade's data case were computer wafers holding enough exchange credits to buy a small planet, to say nothing of a Klingon battle fleet or two. Court was late. Chekhov looked at the time readout on his chronograph. Perhaps he's not going to show. Jade's dark eyes burned into him. He'll show. Even if he doesn't have access to battle cruisers, he won't be able to resist making a grab for those credits. Jade raised her hand and motioned to Chekhov and Uhura to be silent. Footsteps. Court thundered from behind. Reach for the Hovme and turn around slowly. Chekhov and Uhura turned with their hands held high. Court, I thought we were going to do business. Court aimed his disruptor directly at Uhura. Prove to me you can afford to buy what I have to sell. Chekhov started to look over his shoulder. This is our banker. But there was no one behind him. Jade was gone. Court snarled. I have no time for Terran games. She was just here. As Court aimed and fired, Chekhov braced himself and for a second closed his eyes. But he didn't die. Chekhov opened his eyes. In front of his boots, Court's disruptor beam had bubbled the deck metal plate. Jade had her hand on Court's arm where she had pushed him to spoil his aim. In her other hand, she had a phaser, jammed against the Klingon's thick neck. Chekhov got to his feet and Uhura quietly moved beside him. Chekhov yelled at Jade. Where were you? What were you thinking of, waiting so long? The young woman just stared coolly at him, then picked up her data case and circled in front of Court. She popped it open, letting Court see the credit wafers it held. Court, you know I could kill you. But instead, I'm showing you more credits than you could earn in a dozen lifetimes. What does that tell you? Business. You want to do business. Very good. So no more small talk. Katinga-class battle cruisers. How many can you get me? Court rose painfully to his feet. That I cannot provide. Without taking her eyes off the Klingon, Jake spoke to Chekhov and Uhura. Leave. I don't want any witnesses. Chekhov froze. Killing an unarmed prisoner went beyond any bounds he was prepared to accept, even in this new life. But before he could object, Court did. Please, there are other goods I can provide. Jade repeated her demand. Battle cruisers. Surely there is something more out of all the mighty works of the Empire. Chekhov couldn't believe it. The Klingon was groveling. But Jade was like a statue, her phaser arm unwavering. What else could something as miserable as you know about the Empire's mighty works? Court wore the expression of someone who had sunk to the deepest level of Klingon hell. I was a data keeper for the Imperial Forecasters. Chekhov saw Jade's cheek flutter as she tightened her jaw. What level? Chekhov didn't understand the question. He had never heard of the Imperial Forecasters before. They sounded like Klingon meteorologists. Court replied wearily. Crimson. Jade gave a curt nod. I will only ask once, Data Keeper. What was the secret in your crimson level that will make me spare your life? Court tried to square his shoulders, but failed. Chalchach. Chalchach Kime. Chekhov glanced at Uhura. She whispered, something about the sky and children, but an odd construction. Chekhov glanced back at Jade. She was smiling. Chekhov wondered what secret the Klingon had just surrendered. Then with a sudden rush of fear, Chekhov realized that Jade was aiming her phaser directly at him. She still had a horrible smile on her face. Like I said, no witnesses. The blue beam was blinding. Chekhov's last thought was to wonder what Captain Kirk would have done. A grime-covered wall of dark-range platform was the last thing he saw. The first time Kirk had entered the great hall in Starfleet headquarters, he had been a lowly lieutenant, still 2 years from his captaincy. He had been able to admire its grandeur then, uninterrupted. The soaring cathedral of its ceiling, hundreds of meters high, its immense dining floor, its raised orchestra balcony framed by the seal of the Federation. But most of all, Kirk had been able to gaze undisturbed at the mural. It swept wondrously around the great hall's curved walls, tracing the evolution of humanity's journey to the stars. The mural was deliberately unfinished. Its last 50 meters faded to the white of the artist's blank canvas. The message was clear. Humanity's journey, like the artist's painting, would never be finished. But this evening, 2,000 dignitaries filled the great hall, and all of them knew Kirk. He couldn't go anywhere without detecting the unsettling flash of recognition in strangers' eyes. At least at a formal Starfleet reception, his stature was not unique or remarkable. Indeed, there were many whom Kirk himself recognized from having seen their new updates and read about their exploits. 2 of them approached him now, Spock and McCoy. Spock greeted him formally. "Good evening, Captain." McCoy's smile was wider than Kirk's. "Hey, Jim. Quite a spread, isn't it?" "Very impressive, Dr. McCoy." The reception was a wonder to behold. The national costumes of Starfleet's guests, along with the rainbow hues of their skin, were an explosion of color. McCoy turned to Spock. "What about it, Spock?" "What would you have me say, Doctor?" "That you're having a good time. Oh, don't say it. I know it would be illogical." Kirk caught Spock studying him. "Are you well, Captain?" "I didn't get much sleep last night." Spock nodded. "Yes, the rain was unprogrammed." "It wasn't the rain, Spock." Kirk took a breath, preparing himself for what he wanted to say to Spock, to try out the waters. But Spock beat him to it. "Captain, I will be leaving Starfleet at the end of the quarter." Kirk opened his mouth, said nothing. That was going to be his line. "I will be joining the Vulcan Diplomatic Corps." Kirk contained a surprise. "Ah, the family business." Spock nodded thoughtfully. "I will be working with my father on a number of initiatives. Though the Romulan question is what I shall direct most of my efforts toward, Vulcans and Romulans have been apart too long." Spock regarded Kirk with penetrating eyes. "You had something to tell me?" I'm thinking of leaving Starfleet." "I was wondering how long it would take you to reach that decision." "Then you think it's a good idea?" Spock chose his words carefully. "Captain, wherever your future happiness lies, it will not be found in the pronouncements of others. Only you can make that kind of decision." At that moment, an amplified voice boomed throughout the great hall, instantly stopping each conversation.
"Citizens of the Federation and all exalted guests, I have the great pleasure to announce, with the unanimous approval of the Council, Starfleet's new Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Andrevar Drake."
The great hall thundered with applause. Kirk was stunned. The rival he had sworn never to forgive had just achieved an impossible position on the same day Kirk had decided to give up the fight. McCoy's voice betrayed his interest in Kirk's obvious discomfort. "You know him?" "In the Academy, Bones, then on the Farragut." Kirk closed his eyes, saw Lieutenant Drake's sneering face on Tycho 4 laughing at the death of Faith Morgan. "If that's what's going to run Starfleet, then I was right. It's time for me to leave." But in the end, Kirk did not leave the reception and dinner for Starfleet's new commander-in-chief. That would have been admitting defeat, and he never admitted defeat. Instead, he had 3 Romulan ales, effectively changing the rules of the game. He simply no longer cared about Andrevar Drake. He enjoyed sitting there, listening to Spock and McCoy go at it. Spock solemnly eyed the doctor. "Do you know what you shall do upon your retirement from Starfleet, Doctor?" "Who said I was retiring, Spock? I looked at what passes for sickbay design in the new ships on the drawing boards, and I tell you, I am not leaving Starfleet till they carry me out. There's no heart to what they're thinking." McCoy reached for the coffee. "I tend to get a bit passionate about medical's policies." Spock folded his hands together. "Which clearly accounts for your decision to remain in Starfleet." There is still a job you can do for the service which is useful, necessary, and for which you feel passion. Then Spock looked at Kirk. In your case, Captain, passion is the most logical answer to the questions you are facing. McCoy rolled his eyes. Now I've heard everything, Jim. We're being lectured to about passion by a Vulcan. Kirk stared off across the great hall as Spock went on to tell McCoy how Vulcans really did have emotions, and simply chose not to allow them to rule their lives. As Kirk's gaze swept the hall, people on the dance floor caught his glance. Most smiled back at him. Then he found one person who was already looking directly at him before he saw her. It was Kirk's turn to be startled. Perhaps it was her eyes, heavily lashed, dark, and enticing. If he'd been a 20-year-old cadet, he'd have been by her side in 15 seconds. Then he was startled again as he suddenly realized those haunting eyes belonged to a Klingon. Her dark hair, dramatically swept back for the reception, revealed the ripples of her high-ridged brow. Then he saw her ears, pointed, Klingon and Vulcan. She smiled at him. The smile transformed her face. She's gorgeous. That's why I'm staring. She's the most beautiful woman in the hall. And she's letting me stare at her like a shuttle pilot who's been on solo duty for the past 2 years. Kirk's mouth suddenly felt dry, a lightness in his chest, a thrill of anticipation in his stomach. His brain kicked in again. I'm thinking as if I'm 20 again, and she isn't even that. I'm old enough to be her father. Hell, I'm old enough to be her grandfather. A dancing couple moved across his line of sight. The instant she was gone from his vision, Kirk shook his head as if a spell had been broken. Kirk put his hand on McCoy's arm, nodded out to the floor. Bones, that young woman over there in the long dress, she's half Vulcan, half Klingon. I see her, Jim. She's stunning. Spock observed. Klingon, Romulan would be a more logical conclusion. McCoy gave Kirk a quick look of understanding. Whoa, ho, ho. About to add cradle snatching to your list of crimes against the Klingon Empire. Kirk's heart sank. Bones, she's not that young. But when Kirk scanned the crowd again, she was gone, only to reappear a few tables away, heading in Kirk's direction. She was slim, lithe, but clearly a woman, no mere girl. For a moment, as he rose to his feet, Kirk almost forgot how old he had felt recently. He wanted desperately to know why she was coming over to him. He wanted to hear her voice, know her name. But 2 tables over, she stopped. Kirk started to hold out his hand, but another hand came down on his shoulder, hard enough to surprise him. Kirk turned just as he saw the woman do the same, turn away. Kirk was face to face with Andrew Drake, his new commander-in-chief. Drake poked him in the stomach. Jimbo, glad you could make it to my little party. Kirk didn't want to get drawn into anything with Drake. What had happened between them was long past. Congratulations, Admiral. May I introduce my friends, Captain Spock, Dr. McCoy? Drake shook McCoy's hand, then he respectfully raised his hand and gave Spock the Vulcan salute. I know you well, gentlemen. Always followed your career, Jimbo. Can't stay long, but thought you might like to know about the Enterprise. Decommissioned next month. Going to use it for war games. McCoy frowned. Starfleet hasn't fought war games for years. An oversight I intend to correct, Doctor. The Enterprise will be a target ship. Try her out on a couple of the new photon torpedoes. Should go out in a real blaze of glory. See you at the decommissioning ceremony. Kirk shook his head. I'll be off-planet. Drake winked. I'll see that they save you a piece of her. Put it on a plaque, mounted over the fireplace. With that, Drake was gone, swallowed into a crowd of well-wishers. McCoy's face reddened. What the hell was that all about? Kirk sat down again, more tired than when he had begun the evening. We go back. Too far. Kirk looked for the young woman, but she was gone, as he knew she would be. As the Enterprise would soon be gone. As all things must go. Passion among them. McCoy and Spock exchanged a look of concern. Want another drink, Jim? Kirk shook his head. I've had enough. And he didn't mean Romulan ale. Chekhov's first impression of death was that it was colder than Siberia. It also smelled like a Tellarite mud bath. That was when he decided he wasn't dead after all. But he couldn't move, and he couldn't see, and his body ached with the all-too-familiar pains of a high-intensity phaser stun.
She didn't kill us.
Uhura, who was only a few centimeters away, replied,
Thank you, Mr. Obvious.
By now, Chekhov realized they were under the Tellarite ore shuttle in the cargo bay, and its crew was on board.
Why has Jade done this to us?
She said it herself, Pavel. No witnesses. But it's clear she needs bodies. What I still can't figure out is what Chiao Kame is. Probably a code name of some kind. Maybe a type of experimental Klingon weapon system.
Then it makes no sense Jade has done this to us. That's exactly what we were supposed to be buying.
Not exactly, Pavel. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. The cargo bay was being depressurized.
Wonderful. Suffocation and then incineration.
Chekhov strained every muscle against his bonds. Nothing gave. I'll miss you, Pavel. He fought once more against his bonds. He heard Uhura do the same. His lungs ached. Black stars flared at the edges of his vision. Then, there was no more air to breathe. The outer doors in Cargo Bay 12 opened before the straining pumps had removed all of the atmosphere. A sudden storm of ice crystals plumed from the growing gap between the moving doors. The Tellarite ore shuttle in the cargo bay brought its maneuvering systems online. Pavel Chekhov had clenched his eyes shut to prevent the moisture coating them from sublimating in the vacuum. He had gasped desperately for a last lungful of oxygen. But now air flooded his lungs so easily, he was shocked into opening one eye. Captain Hikaru Sulu grinned down at his friends, who were on the transporter platform. Uhura's face tightened in confusion as she looked around.
The Excelsior?
Sulu's laugh was deep and genuine.
I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't. But the expression on your face, Pavel.
Chekhov didn't share Sulu's good humor. He was still shivering with the cold of space.
How long have you been tracking us?
Sulu's smile melted in the force of Chekhov's withering stare.
Pavel, calm down. You're safe now. We've tracked you since the beginning of your mission. I had my orders only to interfere if I thought you were in immediate danger of being killed. And someone did try to kill you, so let's do something about it.
Uhura held Chekhov back and said to Sulu,
It was Jade.
Sulu looked stunned.
But this was her operation. She's supposed to be one of the top agents in Starfleet intelligence.
Uhura told Sulu about the enigmatic exchange between Court and Jade in the cargo bay. Sulu walked around the transporter console and hit a control.
Computer, identify a Klingon organization designated Imperial Forecasters, and in that context, level Crimson.
The Imperial Forecasters were a division of the Klingon Strategic Operations Bureau. The Crimson level corresponds to Starfleet's security classification, Ultra Secret. It was responsible for planning doomsday scenarios.
Uhura cleared her throat.
Computer, translate the Klingon phrase, Chiao Kame.
The phrase occurs in the context of the death poem of Molar. It translates as the children of heaven, referring to those who would inherit the lands destroyed by Molar during his final war against Kalas and his followers.
Sulu shook his head.
Court was once involved in planning doomsday scenarios for the Empire and offers to share something to what he believes is an illegal arms dealer?
Chekhov stated the obvious.
It must be a weapon.
Sulu nodded.
A weapon so terrible it would only be used in the event the Empire was defeated. And whatever kind of weapon the Children of Heaven is, it was enough to make a top Starfleet intelligent agent willing to kill 2 other agents so she could get the secret for herself. We're going to have to take this to Admiral Drake himself.
Chekhov looked puzzled.
Admiral Androwar Drake? Why him? He was just appointed Commander-in-Chief, Starfleet. You want us to report in person? I think we have to assume that a Starfleet intelligence agent like Jade has full access to current subspace codes.
Sulu toggled another control at the console.
Captain, to the bridge. Lay in a course for Earth.
The instant Kirk coalesced from the transporter beam, he knew he had failed. He shifted his boots in the sun-baked dust. He smelled the heat of the place and fought the impulse to grab his communicator and request an immediate beam out. His Starfleet duties were little more than routine, filling his days with detail that, in the end, amounted to nothing. So he'd come here, to the final port in a fruitless mission. He was in Iowa, on the farm, where he had been born, where so long ago his father had held his hand on summer nights and first shown him the stars, where he would find his first, best destiny. He opened the front flap on his uniform jacket in a futile gesture against the heat. He walked toward the farmhouse. As his boots thudded on the worn wood of the porch steps, he tried not to remember how he had once raced up them. He put his hand on the quartz screen of the lock plate by the front door. The scanning mechanism was a century old, like most of the fixtures in the house, but it still worked. The door lock clicked. Kirk stepped into the front hall. The house was empty. All the furniture long since gone to cousins. He looked around the too-quiet house, thinking about the fate of his work, his job. If he left Starfleet, he wouldn't even have that anymore. He went upstairs. His room was much smaller than he remembered. The door frame still bore the marks his older brother Sam had made to measure Kirk's growth. The wood creaked downstairs. Kirk stopped breathing. There was someone else here. Kirk came alive. His hand reached instinctively for his belt and his phaser. But, of course, there was no weapon there. Weapons were no longer needed on this perfect Earth. Kirk moved swiftly, silently to the stairway. The hallway was empty. He glided down the stairs, as silent as a Vulcan. He saw a shadow move across the hallway floor, just for an instant blocking the sun. The intruder was in the kitchen. Like smoke, he moved through the hallway of his home and into the kitchen doorway. He was prepared for anything, except for what he saw. The young woman, from the reception, of the Klingon brow, the Romulan ears. She wore a black, form-fitting jumpsuit, a woman superbly muscled, an athlete by any standard. She exploded into his senses. Dimly, he thought he should say something.
Who are you?
Her smile was instant. She moved toward him until she was so close he could feel the heat of her.
I am Teolani.
Her breath carried flowers and soft winds, erasing the staleness of the empty house. Her touch was incredible, both soft and bitingly electric at the same time. He was aware of nothing but the weight of her body against his, the taste of her, the scent of her. He kissed her with an urgency he hadn't known in years, but suddenly he pushed her away and he felt her surprise. Her dark eyes seemed to glow.
But James, at the reception, I saw this in your eyes. What are you doing in my parents' home? How do you know me? The whole galaxy knows you.
She moved a hand to the neck of her jumpsuit, to the tiny control switch of the fabric sealer. She pressed a finger to the control. The fabric of her jumpsuit parted down her neck.
There's time enough for talk later.
Kirk willed himself to keep his eyes locked on hers.
There won't be a later, unless you answer me now.
Suddenly, Teolani's smile was one that encouraged friendship, not desire.
Ask me whatever you wish to know, James. I have no secrets from you. Why were you at the reception? To celebrate the selection of Starfleet's new commander-in-chief. That's not what I meant. Invitations went out to Starfleet personnel, diplomats, industry leaders from the Federation. Yes, James, and to the Klingon Empire, the Romulan Star Empire, the First Federation, the Unaligned Worlds. And which are you?
She looked down for a moment, as if the question were difficult.
Unaligned. For now.
That made no sense to Kirk. The heritage of her brow and ears clearly said she was one of either the Klingon or Romulan empires.
But your parents...
Teolani traced a finger along the sweep of one delicately pointed ear.
Once, my home was a colony world. We opted for independence many years ago.
Kirk's instincts instantly told him her statement was the beginning of a story. Her initial mind-dazzling approach to him had been some sort of smokescreen. She had something to tell him. something she wanted from him. The afternoon was shaping up to be far more rewarding than he had first thought when he had arrived. It was then the attack began. The kitchen window behind Teolani erupted in a starburst of glittering glassite shards. A spray of green blood blossomed over her shoulder, expanding like a galaxy in space. Her scream was low, drawn out, distorted. She hit the floor, hair flying. She slid, moaned, blood smearing from the angry green gash atop her shoulder, the black jumpsuit torn. The far wall shuddered with a spray of plaster. He scooped her into his arms, and holding her securely, he burst through the kitchen doorway, heading for the stairway. He knew there was at least 2 attackers. The angle of the 2 projectile blasts had told him that. The projectile weapons also gave Kirk a clue to the attackers' motives. If they had wanted to kidnap either Teolani or him, they'd be using phasers to stun them. Their use of projectile weapons indicated they wanted to kill someone and have a body left to show for it, to prove that the job had been done, or to teach others a lesson. Kirk could imagine there would be a few old guard Klingons who would want to phaser him out of existence, but he was certain even Spock would conclude that whoever was charging up the porch stairs of his family farmhouse, they weren't after James T. Kirk. They were after Teolani. He heard them fumble with the lock plate. His glance swept upwards the stairs. The Academy taught that high ground was always preferable, but that meant it was always expected. Kirk pushed his boot against a section of the wood paneling that ran up the side of the stairway. A hidden, half-sized door popped open. The damp smell of the cellar enveloped him. It had been his playground as a child. He ducked down, forcing his way through the small door as he heard a projectile blast the front door's ancient lock plate. He sat down heavily on the top step, still holding Teolani. She stirred and looked up at him. The instant after the cellar door clicked shut, Kirk heard 2 harsh voices. Their speech was clipped. He couldn't make out the language. Kirk eased Teolani to the step below him. He placed a hand on her shoulder to guide her down the wooden stairs into the darkness. Then the footsteps above resumed, became fainter. The attackers moved upward to the higher ground. Kirk smiled. This was going to be easy. He reached for his belt, brought out his communicator. He moved closer to Teolani and put her arm around his waist. He tapped the silent emergency recall button on the communicator. In seconds, the Starfleet transporter grid would beam him and Teolani to an orbital station. He braced for the cool wash of the transporter beam. It didn't come. Whoever the attackers were, they had a subspace jammer operating nearby. The transporter wasn't going to save the day. But that suited Kirk. The 2 intruders remained upstairs, but eventually they'd think about a cellar. In the darkness, Kirk guided Teolani toward where he knew the far wall would be. He reached out blindly and touched the cellar wall. He slid his fingers along the rough polycrete till he found the edge of the tunnel door to the old bomb shelter. He found the small handle, twisted it. In the tunnel, he found the light switch. Kirk motioned for Teolani to go first. Kirk listened one last time for footsteps. They were coming downstairs, fast. He entered the tunnel, pulled the door shut, threw the sliding lock. Run! They scrambled along the tunnel. It turned sharply at 30 meters where the entrance to the bomb shelter was. Teolani slowed as she saw the bomb shelter's entrance, but it was not Kirk's destination. It would only be a trap. He urged her to keep running. The door to the barn entrance was dead ahead. He shoved open the door, pulled Teolani through, then closed it behind them. They stood in a sunken stairwell, open to the barn. Sunlight filtered in through the old boards. He sprinted up the polycrete stairs. He found some old hay bales by the empty horse stalls. Together, he and Teolani tossed 5 bales into the stairwell. The attackers would have to dig their way out once they realized they couldn't open the door. Teolani whispered to him, "I don't hear them." Kirk heard the thud of a vehicle door outside. He crept to a narrow gap between 2 boards in the barn's high wall. An anti-grav car was parked in the yard, halfway between the barn and the farmhouse. The attackers wore nondescript civilian clothes that would not attract attention on any world. His attackers' foreheads were furrowed like a Klingon's, but their ears were pointed. "Teolani, do you know them?" Teolani shook her head. "But they're your people." Her dark eyes burned into him. "They don't want me, James. They want you." Kirk didn't believe her. He watched the 2 Klingon Romulans in heated conversation. The one in the vehicle slammed shut the cover of the subspace jammer on his lap. They would have to know it was functioning properly. They'd know that he and Teolani were still somewhere near. Kirk stared at the anti-grav car and suddenly realized what he had missed. Teolani, how did you get here? A car. I parked it down by the gate. Kirk calculated the odds and knew the car was too far away. The youth in the car got out. Both of them stood in the yard, dark eyes sweeping the area, weapons held ready. They're going to find us. If we're going to take control of the situation, we have to make them find us under our terms, not theirs. Teolani raised an eyebrow in appreciation. Tell me what to do. Kirk looked around the barn. It was all so familiar. As kids, he and Sam had saved the Federation 1,000 times here. He decided the enemy wouldn't have a chance. It took less than a minute to set the trap. The Klingon Romulans were already beginning to move toward the barn. Kirk watched them from his vantage point high in the hayloft. Teolani now crouched by the empty horse stalls. Kirk tossed a small piece of chipped polycrete so it hit the barn door. Instantly, both Klingon Romulans fired at the door, splintering its ancient wood. Then one of the youths ran forward, kicked away the remains of the 2 barn boards. He eased through, slowly, gleaming weapon leading the way.
There's no escape. Accept your fate. Die honorably.
Kirk held his position, knowing he could not be seen. The youth said something over his shoulder. His partner edged warily through the splintered door. Kirk waited till the 2 Klingon Romulans stood shoulder to shoulder, then he tossed a second chip of polycrete. It landed far back in the barn's depths. It was Kirk's signal to Teolani. She made her move. Like a molten shadow, she flew from a stall, somersaulting over the half-height door, flipping over, landing precisely on her feet, and continuing on. The barn rang with the sounds of explosions as the attackers' shots traced Teolani's path, always a heartbeat behind. Kirk leapt from the hayloft, rocketing down on the rope looped around the old hay pulley, pulling up his legs just so to hit each attacker squarely in the back with each boot. The wrenching impact sent shocks of fire along Kirk's legs and up his back. He released the rope and landed running. One youth lay face down on the barn's polycrete floor, but his partner was on his knees. The kneeling youth brought his weapon up. Teolani charged. Her blood-curdling Klingon death cry filled the barn. The youth's weapon wavered. That moment's distraction was all Kirk needed. He leapt forward and hit the youth's shoulder to chest. It was the final indignity to Kirk's challenged muscles. Something tore in his shoulder. Kirk's teeth ground together. He tasted blood from the cuts on his face, but still he grabbed the bare-armed youth by the front of his vest and drove in hard with a solid headbutt. Stars flashed before Kirk's eyes with the sharp crack of his forehead against the youth's heavy brow ridges. But green blood flooded from the attacker's nose. His dark eyes lost focus. Kirk sat back on the floor, taking inventory of his aching joints and limbs. Teolani knelt beside him. She held both attackers' weapons. "You're hurt, James." Kirk laughed at the understatement. Teolani frowned. "You think this is amusing?" "No, I was just thinking that I haven't felt this good in years." When Kirk felt he could breathe without setting fire to his shoulder, he knelt beside one of the felled attackers. He held his hand to the youth's chest and put his fingers to the youth's neck. The attacker was dead. "I didn't hit him that hard." He went to the second youth, still face down on the floor. This second youth was also dead. It made no sense. They weren't meant to die from a blow to the jaw or a kick to the back. Teolani tried to comfort him. "But they were trying to kill you, James." He held Teolani by the shoulders. "Why were they trying to kill me? You owe me answers." But she touched his face again, held out a single finger stained with red blood. His blood. "There's a med kit in my car." He nodded wearily and started for the barn door. Teolani quickly took hold of his hand as if to steady him. Outside, the air had become sharper, sweeter, more intense than before. As he limped along the dirt driveway to the car, he questioned her again. "Tell me, Teolani, why did they come here? So you would not be able to help me bring peace to my world." She was almost as infuriating as Spock could be, never volunteering additional details. "Where is your world? What's its name?" She seemed to come to some decision. to tell him. My world has many designations, James, depending on whose charts it appears. But for those of us who were born there, who live there, we call it Chiao. It began as a colony, a joint venture of sorts. I think you can guess who its founders were. He nodded. The Klingons and the Romulans. Yes, one of many attempts to bring the two empires together, and a failure like all the others. In the end, neither empire wanted us, so we chose to make our own way. I can't imagine either empire willingly giving up a colony world, not if there was a chance the other side would claim it. James, as far as either empire knew at the time, my world had nothing of value. Chiao was nothing more than a failed experiment from the past, more regrettable than exploitable. You say at the time, then something has changed? He stood back as Teolani punched in the operating code on the car door and retrieved the med kit. Yes, as you suspect, our world has something of value after all, something neither empire knew of. Some on Chiao want to profit from our past and our world's treasure, but some of us cannot allow our world to be plundered and exploited. Teolani reached out to wipe his face, but he stopped her. What about your shoulder? She touched the tear in her jumpsuit, crusted with blood. She tried to pull back, but he wouldn't let her. He began cleansing her wound with a swab. The dried green blood flaked away. There was no wound, only a purplish green bruise and raised yellow welt. I saw you get shot. The projectile exploded, threw you across the kitchen. I know you were hurt. I told you my world has a treasure, James, a gift it bestows on all who live there. Kirk felt the heat of her unblemished body warm his hand. Come home to Chiao with me, James. Come home with me and save my world. Come home and be young forever. Suddenly she kissed him. The fragrance of her hair, her breath, swept over him. Come back with me. His finger lightly trailed along her body, traced the swell of her breast where she pressed against him. Why does a planet blessed with people like you need someone like me? A small smile flickered across her face. Experience, James. After today, I can attest to its value. Then Kirk recognized the sound of the attacker's anti-grav car taking off. Teolani held onto his arm, watching with him as the car banked over the barn and sped off toward the north. There must have been 3 of them. Kirk stared after the car. Then why didn't the third one come after us too? Teolani's voice shook with a burst of anger, with hatred. Why do they want to destroy my world? She pressed her head against Kirk's chest. He held her close. There were no more questions in his mind, no more uncertainties. Time was slipping too quickly through his fingers. He would not let this chance slip through as well. James T. Kirk was a civilian, and he was moving forward again. With a lightness of being he had not felt in a long time, he headed toward the central hall of the San Francisco Travel Port. Teolani was waiting for him there, and her face lit up as she saw him emerge from the crowd. He didn't know what would happen next in his life, but here at the crossroads of the galaxy, he was no longer without direction. Teolani had a private yacht standing by already, cleared for launch. They were swept along a moving walkway toward a private shuttle pad. On the tarmac, he saw Teolani's sleek yacht, caught in a web of floodlights. Its smooth white hull glowed stark against the night. Near it was the pilot, one of Teolani's hybrid race, furrowed brow, pointed ears. It is a great honor to meet you, sir. Full of hope, rejecting doubt, Kirk held Teolani's hand tightly as they boarded the yacht. Soon the yacht shot up through the night, heading toward Teolani's ship. The stars became crisp and unwavering. He was back in space. With satisfaction, he watched the western seaboard of North America recede on a flight view screen. He turned to Tailani. "Is your ship in free orbit or docked?" "Docked, James." He patiently folded his hands together. No doubt her ship had required servicing for the voyage ahead. But judging from their continued ascent, the pilot was taking them past the orbital plane of most commercial space docks. Finally, the pilot announced they were on docking approach. Kirk stared dead ahead, but saw nothing. Then the Earth's thin layer of air flashed red, flared blue, white, and the sun was before them. In the sudden wash of that brilliant dawn, Kirk saw his destination. Tailani's ship was the Enterprise. "Tailani, how..." Tailani left her seat and knelt by Kirk's. "My planet negotiated for her, James. But she was going to be used in war games." Tailani lightly kissed Kirk's cheek. A goodwill gesture on the Federation's part. She's to become the first ship in Chiao's planetary defense group. Of course, she's not quite the ship you remember. The closest things to weapons are navigational deflectors and tractor beams, but I thought you could live with those changes. Kirk still had a hard time grasping what had happened. "You own her now?" "She's yours now, James. Free and clear. A gift from my world to you." The pilot guided the yacht toward the hangar bay. The Enterprise called out to Kirk beyond the clouds, among the stars, one last time. When Kirk stepped onto the bridge of the Enterprise for the first time in months, Tailani remained behind in the lift, giving him this moment. He paused on the upper deck. The artificial gravity felt right. The air smelled a bit too much like chemical cleansers, but the temperature was set precisely where he preferred it. Overall, though, Tailani was right. The Enterprise was different. Most noticeably, her warp generators were offline. The bridge environment was quieter, too, the crew replaced by the slow flickering of the status lights on our new automated control stations. The greatest change of all, though, was not in the hardware of the vessel. It was in the crew. They were all Tailani's people, young Klingon Romulans in such robust, dynamic health that Kirk felt another year older for each one he saw. There wasn't a Starfleet uniform in sight. The young Chiao crew nodded respectfully to Kirk as he went to the center of the bridge. His chair, at least, hadn't been changed or removed. He sat in it, put his hands on either arm. It felt good to be back. But not right. Spock's science station was dark, and he doubted anyone was in sickbay to answer his call, except ghosts. Tailani came down to the lower deck. "Is something wrong, James?" But before Kirk could answer, something changed. The warp engines were online again, as smooth as they had ever been. The heart of the Enterprise had been restored. He smiled and studied his crew again. The oldest child he had seen was no more than 25 standard years. How could these children have brought this ship back to life, unless... Without looking, Kirk touched the control that opened a line to the engine room. "Kirk to engineering."
Scotty here, Captain.
"Mr. Scott, I thought you had retired."
Aye, so did I, but 'twas the last, Tailani. Starfleet put her in touch with me, and she told me what it was she was planning to do with the Enterprise. I figured if the time wasn't quite right for the old girl to retire, then it wasn't quite right for me either.
"You've done a magnificent job with her, Scotty."
Captain, just so you know, the Enterprise served the best parts of her well. Starfleet's taken those back. Left her in a kind of depleted condition, if you know what I mean.
The question is, Mr. Scott, will she get us to Chiao?
Aye, I'll see to that. Warp power is online and ready when you need it, Captain. Scotty out.
Kirk caught Tailani's sly grin. "Tailani, did you tell Scotty what to expect on Chiao?" Tailani shook her head. "He'll find out when he arrives, and he can stay if he wants to." She gave Kirk a quick kiss. "You may give the word any time, James." Kirk faced forward. The Earth filled the view screen, clouds white, ocean sparkling. a place he no longer belonged.
Navigator, lay in a course for Chiao, best possible speed, and take us out of orbit. Ahead, impulse power.
The Enterprise hummed to life around it. The sensor image of Earth shrank in the view screen as they left the planet. Once again, Kirk went where he had always gone before, into the unknown. Even as the Enterprise streaked from Earth and the heart of Sector 001, the Excelsior, under Hikaru Sulu's command, returned. After docking that same day, Chekhov, Uhura, and Sulu found themselves rushed to Admiral Androva Drake's house in San Francisco's Presidio district. In his study, they sat across from him, each in a separate chair. Drake began the meeting with compliments.
You all have exemplary records. Commander Chekhov, Commander Uhuru, Starfleet recognizes and especially appreciates your valor and self-sacrifice in undertaking a potentially deadly, covert assignment to stop the flow of Klingon armaments to the illegal market. Captain Sulu, your exploits on the Excelsior are carving a place in history along Jim Kirk's himself, which is why I have decided to bring you all on board another ultra-secret operation already underway.
Sulu leaned forward.
What kind of operation, sir?
Drake's friendly attitude disappeared. He pressed a control on the computer screen beside him.
I'm now recording this conversation. Everything I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. Is that clear? Please reply audibly.
One by one, Chekhov, Sulu, and Uhuru stated they understood. Then Drake held his finger over another desk control.
I'm now going to ask two other officers to join us. They are also involved in this operation.
A side door in the study opened inward. The two other officers were Spock and McCoy. The Admiral directed Spock and McCoy to take their seats, then began his briefing.
Bottom line, I regret to inform you that the entire Starfleet command structure might be compromised by a cabal of senior officers, traitors who will stop at nothing to prevent the Federation from achieving a secure peace agreement with the Klingon Empire.
Uhura made the first comment.
And you're drawing us in because you must think that this rogue agent Jade is somehow connected to the renegade command officers?
Sulu turned to Spock.
You already know what happened at Dark Range Platform.
Spock nodded.
Admiral Drake shared your report with us just prior to this meeting.
Then Sulu addressed Drake.
Sir, are you seriously postulating a connection between a rogue agent, a Klingon superweapon, and a conspiracy within Starfleet?
Spock calmly steepled his fingers and answered for the Admiral.
Consider, Captain Sulu, what might happen if a Klingon doomsday weapon were used, not just to destroy a ship or a colony, but to lay waste a planet, perhaps Earth or Vulcan itself. Consider also the ramifications of an investigation into the use of the weapon. If an official investigation finds evidence of a Starfleet conspiracy to use the weapon, then the public conclusion will be that it was a Klingon plot to shift blame from the Empire. In the confusion that would follow, the individual worlds of the Federation would have to choose sides. The Council would be in chaos.
Drake wrapped up the analysis with the ultimate conclusion.
And under those conditions, the Federation would be vulnerable to Klingon attack. And if the Klingons think we would use an attack on the Klingon Empire as a way to reunite our members, then the Empire would have no choice but to strike first, which is why Starfleet needs all of you to help stop that Klingon weapon from falling into the wrong hands.
Chekhov started to ask if anyone had any idea what the weapon, codenamed Children of Heaven, might be, but he stopped. He looked at McCoy and Spock.
Excuse me, Captain Spock. I know why the rest of us are here, but why are you and Dr. McCoy part of this operation?
McCoy and Spock looked at Drake. Drake looked uncomfortable.
This is an extremely difficult situation for me. I've been conducting an internal investigation looking for at least one Starfleet individual who is unquestionably connected to the conspiracy to start a war with the Klingon Empire.
Uhura stared at Drake.
And have you found someone?
Drake nodded gravely.
I have.
Chekhov couldn't stand the suspense.
Well, who is it?
Drake's answer struck Chekhov like lightning.
James T. Kirk.
Chekhov was outraged.
That is impossible.
Drake raised his voice without shouting.
I saw proof.
Chekhov spat.
What proof?
Slowly, almost reluctantly, Spock stood up. Drake pressed a control and a section of wall slid away to reveal a display screen. There was a picture on it of a beautiful young Klingon woman in a black jumpsuit. Or was she Klingon? Spock explained.
The young woman's name is Teal'c. She is a hybrid. Her parents were Klingon and Romulan. As far as Starfleet intelligence can ascertain, despite a relatively young age, she is a high-ranking official in her planetary government. A colony world, somewhere on the frontier between the Klingon and Romulan empires. The planet's name is Chiao, a Klingon term for heaven. Given what we know, it is logical to conclude that some of their more extreme weapons were developed on planets far removed from Klingon centers of population, in the event something went wrong.
McCoy muttered his disgust.
Same as testing fusion bombs on Pacific Islands in the 20th century. Precisely, Doctor. All evidence to date suggests the joint Romulan-Klingon colony on Chiao was the center for the development, construction, and storage of a weapon. The weapon was codenamed Children of Heaven. It was intended to be used only in the event of the total defeat of the Klingon Empire.
Chekhov interrupted.
But what does any of this have to do with Captain Kirk?
The picture changed again. Kirk and Teal'c, both in civilian clothes, locked in each other's arms, kissing. Chekhov guessed it had been taken at a travel port somewhere on Earth. Drake then spoke.
3 days ago, Jim Kirk resigned from Starfleet. He simply logged his resignation request into his personnel file and left.
Chekhov found that difficult to believe.
Left? For where?
Spock replied.
Presumably Chiao. 20 hours ago.
Uhura stood up.
I, for one, don't like where this is going. You're making the captain out to be one of your conspirators, and that's ridiculous.
Drake told her to sit down.
You'll get no argument from me. Jim Kirk is one of the most dedicated officers ever to wear a Starfleet uniform. The point is, he is not wearing that uniform anymore. And look at that picture. Jim is 62 years old. That woman is what, maybe 20?
Spock folded his hands behind his back.
The captain's behavior in this week leading up to his resignation was emotionally erratic.
Uhura batted her eyes at Spock.
Maybe he's in love, Mr. Spock. He believes he is.
Sulu shrugged.
For the captain, that would explain a great deal.
Drake pointed to the picture.
She is a very attractive young woman. But Teal'c is only part of the bargain. Kirk's new job is coordinator of Chiao's planetary defenses. His payment is a unique one.
Spock cleared his throat.
Teal'c's government has given the captain the Enterprise?
Chekhov's jaw dropped open.
Is that possible?
Drake looked directly at Chekhov.
I trust you all agree that the gift of it to Kirk does put a different light on his actions. Believe me, I am not for a moment suggesting that Jim has been a willing member of any conspiracy in Starfleet, but what I am afraid the evidence does suggest is that he is being used by the conspirators.
Chekhov didn't know what to say. Could the captain, in the end, simply be someone who finally made a wrong choice, blinded by the desire to have one last adventure in life?
But what are Teal'c's motives?
Spock answered.
It is our belief that Captain Kirk is being deliberately manipulated as a pawn. Someone is using him in an attempt to turn the Enterprise into a delivery system for the Children of Heaven weapon. What that weapon is, where it is intended to be used, these are questions which Starfleet has yet to answer.
But Chekhov knew Spock well enough to read between the lines of what he said.
Commander Spock, what are your beliefs?
Spock gave Chekhov a look of total disinterest.
I am puzzled that you ask that question, Commander Chekhov. Personal beliefs are not logical.
The realization of what was happening in this room suddenly burst through Chekhov like a nova. Spock was lying. Drake didn't appear to recognize Spock's distrust of him. He probably believed the old story that Vulcans never lied. But Chekhov had learned that Vulcans were extremely adaptable. Given the right motive, a logical motive which did not involve personal gain, few Vulcans would have any reservations about exaggerating or withholding information. Chekhov caught Uhura's eye. He saw she had sensed what Spock was doing as well. Chekhov questioned Drake closely.
If Captain Kirk represents such a threat to security, then why the hell did Starfleet allow him to get the Enterprise in the first place?
Drake spoke as if making a confession.
We don't know where Chiao is.
Sulu understood Drake's point.
So, Starfleet has made Captain Kirk a pawn as well, and you want the Excelsior to track the Enterprise in order to locate Chiao.
Drake nodded.
And then return with the Children of Heaven, whatever it is. When can you be ready to leave? 4 hours, sir.
Then Drake surveyed the others.
No doubt you will have other technical questions, but before you ask them, Captain Spock will provide you with background files on what we know about Tehlani, Chiao, and the Imperial Forecasters.
No one had anything more to say. Chekhov was the last to leave. At the doorway, he looked over his shoulder. Drake was looking at him as if he had expected Chekhov to turn around. He waved farewell, as if they were friends. Then the door clicked, and Chekhov heard the faint buzz of a security screen. Drake had locked his study and sealed it with a force field. Chekhov stared at the door. He wondered what secrets Drake was hiding behind it, and from whom. Even as the door to Drake's study sealed itself behind its force field, another door opened, an inner door. A woman had stepped through that hidden door. She was compact, attractive, with finely drawn features and dark complexion. She still wore the flight suit and tight-fitting hood she had worn on dark-range platform. Drake rose to greet her.
You heard?
The woman pulled her flight hood, shaking loose her dark hair. The resemblance between Drake and the woman was striking. Her code name had been Jade, but her real name was Ariadne Drake, father and daughter. She kissed her father's cheek. I should have disintegrated Chekhov and Uhura in the cargo bay when I had the chance, or ejected them from the airlock when I got rid of Court.
No, you did the right thing. If they had disappeared altogether, intelligence would have launched a full investigation.
Ariadne went to a small cabinet against the wall, pressed a hidden switch. The cabinet unfolded into a bar. She gave her father a snifter of brandy, poured the same for herself. We've been after the Chiao Kame for years. That pathetic Klingon on Dark Range finally gave us the connection to Chiao that we needed. But now we're tossing a potential superweapon into Kirk's lap. Drake sipped his brandy, unconcerned.
Kirk is a man of the moment. He has no vision, so he'll do exactly what we want him to do, lead us to Chiao and to the Children of Heaven. Then, one way or another, he'll be superseded.
Ariadne drank the contents of her glass in one quick toss. I still think torturing Tehlani would have been simpler. Drake put down his snifter.
That wouldn't have been wise. We tried interrogating some of her compatriots. No matter what we did to them, we learned nothing. They have incredible control over their autonomic nervous systems. As soon as they realized there was no escape, they literally willed themselves to death.
Drake poured more brandy into Ariadne's glass, then his own.
We can't risk Tehlani suddenly vanishing. Someone might start asking questions.
Ariadne asked her father, "How did you manage to get Tehlani to go after Kirk?" In a lightning change of mood, Drake winked at Ariadne.
I told her to. I gave her his complete psyche file. Told her how sorry I was that Starfleet couldn't get involved in defending a planet so deep in Klingon-Romulan territory, but suggested, off the record, mind you, that Kirk couldn't refuse the challenge.
What if she tells him that recruiting him was your idea?
She won't. Kirk's a proud man. I made it clear to her that if he got any hint that he's being manipulated into helping Chiao, he'd walk away at once.
Ariadne walked over to an armchair, sat down, hooking one leg over the arm, letting it swing.
How'd anyone as predictable as Kirk ever last so long in the service, let alone command a starship?
Drake grinned, the smile of a predator.
Years have not been kind to Kirk. I've done my best to keep it that way.
The Excelsior was Sulu's ship, but at this moment everyone looked to Spock. He, Chekhov, Sulu, Uhura, and McCoy had gathered in a briefing room as soon as they had beamed aboard the starship from Drake's home.
As I see it, we are faced with three possibilities. First, it may be that events are exactly as Admiral Drake has described them to us. Captain Kirk, for personal reasons, has become an unwitting pawn in an attempt to discover the secret of a powerful Klingon doomsday weapon. However, the second possibility is that Teolani's people themselves may be responsible for involving the captain.
Uhura interrupted.
And the third possibility, Mr. Spock, that nothing Admiral Drake said to us is correct.
McCoy was the only one at the table who did not appear to be reassured by Spock's analysis.
Are you saying that the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet lied to us? That cannot be discounted, Doctor, which is why I did not offer any of these theories to Admiral Drake in our meeting with him.
McCoy wasn't happy with that answer either.
But if what Drake told us is a lie, Spock, what's the truth?
I believe the truth is known only to one person involved in these events, Captain Kirk. Kirk missed his Starfleet sideburns. He had had them ever since the Academy, but 2 days ago, Teolani had carefully shaved them off. Teolani had told him that his Starfleet sideburns would cause him to stand out where they were going. Not on Chiao, but on Prester 5. It was a bleak, backwater planet just inside the boundaries of the Klingon Empire, close to the Federation's watch posts. Prester 5 was to be the Enterprise's first port of call for supplies and equipment. Now Kirk and Scotty sat at a wobbling table in a dingy spaceport bar on the outskirts of the planet's capital city. They were waiting for Teolani to join them. Like any good Klingon drinking establishment, there were a number of ears nailed to the wall behind the bartender station, most of them human. Kirk looked away from the collection of ears, smiled at Scotty.
We haven't done this for a long time, have we, Scotty? Sit in a bar, wear civilian clothes for a change, have a few drinks?
No, we haven't. Kirk sipped what passed for beer on Prester 5. Scotty did the same. Kirk tried to break what became an awkward silence.
Scotty, is there something wrong?
Scotty sighed noisily. The Prester of beer left an attractive little fringe of blue foam on his mustache.
Ah, Captain, we've been traveling on the Enterprise for the past 8 days, and you've barely said 2 words to me that weren't having to do with the engines. Mr. Scott, I'm not that busy now.
Kirk raised his glass in a toast.
To the Enterprise, the finest ship Starfleet ever saw.
But Kirk couldn't help himself.
So, how are the engines?
Scotty's eyes twinkled.
I've had to rework the intervalve couplings to keep the power groupings online, and with the new disruptor cannons being installed...
Kirk interrupted.
Excuse me? Disruptors? Klingon disruptor cannons on the Enterprise? Captain, we don't have any phasers. Our tractor beams have been downgraded. If the Enterprise is to be part of the planetary defense systems, she needs something to defend herself with, don't you think?
Kirk couldn't argue with that.
But where did we get disruptor cannons?
Scotty smiled.
Teolani was the one who did the dealing. Right here in the bar, I'm told. There are a number of Klingon ex-officers who see nothing wrong in selling surplus equipment to the highest bidder. Is there anything else being installed on my ship I should know about?
Scotty scratched at his mustache.
A few antimatter pods, 10 photon torpedoes, twin disruptor cannons, shield augmenters, tractor enhancers. That's about the lot.
Kirk leaned forward and gave Scotty a conspiratorial whisper.
Does any of this refitting make sense to you, Scotty? Why not? You got to want to have a whole ship to command, don't you?
Scotty poured the last of the blue beer from the copper pitcher. Something thick and green plopped out of the pitcher and into his glass. Scotty eyed it warily, but it didn't move on its own. He upended his glass and bravely swallowed the thick green sludge. Kirk flinched.
Scotty, how could you? Trust me, Captain. There is nothing that could be alive in a brew as foul as this one.
The surly Klingon bartender lumbered over to Kirk's table with another battered copper pitcher of blue beer. She said any customer who ate the green sludge got a free pitcher. It was house policy. Scotty asked politely,
What exactly is the green sludge?
The bartender gaped at Scotty in admiration.
You don't know?
Scotty shook his head. The bartender erupted with a bone-chilling howl of Klingon laughter and whomped him on the back, then went back to her bar. Suddenly, Kirk felt familiar hands move across his back and slide around his chest. Taylani whirled him around and kissed him, her usual dramatic entrance.
I'm done, James. I didn't know you had anything more to do.
The Enterprise is a big ship, James. She needs a great deal of supplies. She reached out to pour herself a glass of beer. Scotty held out a cautioning hand.
Careful of the sludge, lass.
I know. If you accidentally eat any of it, they have to give you a free pitcher to help dredge the worms out of your system. Kirk was impressed by how quickly the color drained from Scotty's face. The engineer quickly excused himself. As soon as he was gone, Taylani reached across the table and squeezed Kirk's hand.
Ready to start work as coordinator of Chiao's planetary defense force? We're being followed.
Kirk immediately glanced around the bar.
Not here. In space. The people who went after you on the farm.
What sort of ship do they have?
A Tholian starcruiser, Emerald class. We can outrun it. Or outfight it.
Good. Then I think we should outrun it.
We'll still meet up with it on Chiao, won't we?
Not if they don't think we're going there. They're going to be able to track us here to Prester 5 easily. They're also going to find out about all the equipment we've taken on board. So what we have to do is make them think we've gone to another system looking for space dock facilities so we can install everything. When we leave Prester 5, I think we should set up a false trail just to give us some extra time to prepare things on Chiao. It was Kirk's turn to be serious.
Scotty told me about all the weapons systems you were having installed aboard the Enterprise. Tell me who those weapons are intended to be used against. I know it's not just a Tholian starcruiser.
Taylani looked away from him, making up her mind.
If things work out the way I hope, they won't have to be used against anyone. Just the fact that we have them should be enough to get the other side to the negotiating table.
What other side?
The anarchists. Those among us who want to destroy Chiao by telling the galaxy what we have to offer.
Well, if that's all they have to do, then why haven't they done it already? Send a few broad-beam subspace transmissions, and the whole quadrant would know about your world in weeks. Taylani wrapped both hands around her glass of beer.
They're not that fanatical, James. What the anarchists intend to do is to keep Chiao's location a secret so they can sell access to it to a select few.
Taylani, is that so wrong?
When you see Chiao, you'll understand why even that level of exploitation is intolerable.
She eased forward over the table until her lips brushed against his.
10 more days, James Kirk. Then you'll see for yourself.
Ten days later, the Enterprise slipped into standard orbit of Chiao. Kirk stared through the forward viewport of Taylani's yacht as the Enterprise's hangar doors ponderously opened. Chiao was a sapphire before him. Rich, deep blue beyond any word Kirk knew in any language. An ocean world, 90% of her pure, azure waters. The binary suns of Chiao glinted from the world's vast ocean. It was as if every summer day on every beach that ever was had been collapsed into one perfect, shimmering blue moment.
Taylani, I never thought to ask, but what does Chiao mean?
Taylani held his hand.
Chiao means heaven.
And Taylani's yacht took them down to paradise. Soon, on the distant horizon, Kirk saw a string of islands rise from the sea. The largest island was where the colony of Chiao had first been founded, where its first and only city remained. It had a population of almost 1,000, small enough that they had little impact on the world's ecology. There was food enough for the taking without requiring anyone to work in agriculture for more than a few weeks in any year. The technological infrastructure the colony's founders had installed was robust and capable of self-repair. With no industry and no exports, Kirk was uncertain where Chiao's trade credits originally came from. Teolani had no answers either. She had merely inherited a system set in place from the beginning. The yacht eased to the right, following the curve of the island's shore. The city was before them, nestled in green. Beige and cream and pale pink walls and roofs were arranged like scattered seashells, raised on a small outcropping of black volcanic rock caught in the jungle's edge, overlooking the sweep of a protected harbor and kilometers of wide, white beach. There was a central structure larger than any other building, a covered stadium. They landed at the city's edge. When the yacht's hatch sprang open, Kirk gasped as the rich air of Chiao flooded the cabin. He smelled the ocean, the flowers, the damp green of the jungle. For a moment he felt dizzy. His heart raced, and he felt a rush of exhilaration. Teolani turned to him. "Are you all right, James?" He joined her at the hatchway, swung her off her feet, hugged her, smothered her laughing face with kisses. He decided he was going to like it here. Everything was new because of Teolani. Together, they took a long walk away from the landing pad through some jungle to the water's edge. Gentle waves, bordered by translucent foam, lapped at the white sand. Tiny flying creatures chased the water. They watched as Chiao's binary suns hung like an hourglass in an unbroken blue sky. From space, Kirk had seen the incandescent plasma bridge that joined the two stars. Kirk slipped his arm around Teolani. "Now I know why you want to keep this world a secret. If people knew what it was like here, you'd be beach-to-beach hotels and travel ports inside a year." She held him closer. "That's why you're here." Kirk looked into her eyes. "I'm here because of you. You told me you needed someone to save your world, remember? And then you brought me to heaven. Were you expecting a war zone? Some sign of imminent danger, at least." He ran his hands along her back, the silky fabric of her light tunic no barrier to the softness of her skin. Teolani stepped back from him. "You're feeling the effects of Chiao, aren't you?" "Yes, I feel younger, more alive than I have in years." But he didn't kiss her as she expected. "Teolani, is there something you aren't telling me? Who is your enemy? I need to know." Teasingly, she reached out for the drawstring of his pants. "But I need you." Kirk surrendered. How could he not? Kirk had found his Eden. Then, a deep rumble resonated through the air. Kirk turned to look past the jagged rock, along the beach toward the city. A billowing fireball blossomed, rising into the air on a trail of black smoke. Teolani's face was white with fear. "They're attacking again. They said they would talk, but they're attacking again." "Teolani, who's attacking? The anarchists?" "Yes, the anarchists, the old ones, our parents." Kirk decided it was not the time or place for more questions. He flipped open his communicator. "Kirk to Enterprise." Scotty answered, and Kirk gave his orders. Within seconds, Kirk and Teolani were beamed from the beach to Teolani's yacht. Kirk felt the heat from a new fireball that exploded not more than a kilometer away in the jungle. Smoke wafted through the lush growth toward the simple city buildings. A new transporter column sparkled into being. Kirk pulled on the jacket that lay atop the equipment Scotty had beamed down. He tossed the second one to Teolani. Then he strapped on the equipment belt. He flipped open the screen on his tactical scanner. The screen came alive with moving dots of color. Teolani watched over his shoulder. "What is it, James?" "The Enterprise is sweeping the area with her sensors. This screen shows the position of the attackers." "Scotty, can you pick those shells off in flight?" "Negative, Captain. We don't have the precision aim we're used to." Kirk dragged Teolani toward the shelter of the yacht. "What sort of defense does the city have?" "Hand disruptors. Projectile guns. The anarchists! What's their objective? Taylani was frightened. Kirk was surprised at her reaction. She hadn't behaved this way when they were under attack at the farm. Taylani, I can't help you unless you tell me what they're trying to do. The power station in the center of town. The large domed building. Kirk found the building on the tactical screen. The anarchists were about 3 kilometers distant from it. Scotty, can you lock transporters onto the 20 or so life signs in the jungle to the north of the city? Sorry, sir. The jungle is full of life signs. Birds and animals, I'm guessing, and we just don't have precise enough control to isolate the attackers. How about a low-intensity disruptor burst? Aye, if you don't mind knocking out a few wee beasties, too. Kirk looked at Taylani. Can the life forms here stand up to a stun setting? I think so. Do it, Scotty. Targeting now, Captain. Setting disruptor cannons to lowest power. A section of sky to the north of the city suddenly flared with orange light. Kirk checked his tactical screen. The dots that represented the anarchists were still there, indicating they were alive. But they weren't moving. Good shooting, Mr. Scott. Stand by. Kirk flipped his communicator closed. It's over, Taylani. The Enterprise has worked her magic. Only for now, James. They aren't the only ones who threaten us. Kirk hugged her. Vacation's over. No more secrets. Tell me everything. He felt her nod against his chest, and she held nothing back. She told Kirk that when the Klingons and Romulans withdrew their support, the original colonists left, but their children chose to stay. It was their home. 40 years they lived in peace, completely ignored by the rest of the galaxy. Taylani didn't know how, but all records of Chiao's location were purged from the central surveys of the two empires. Some think it was a final gift from one of the original colonists to ensure their children wouldn't be disturbed. As it turned out, Chiao did have one resource that was imminently exploitable: the gift of living forever. What to do about that resource caused a split among its inhabitants, along generational lines. The older generation, who had wanted to exploit Chiao, had become anarchists, trying to tear down Chiao's society, cause chaos, so they could steal a spacecraft or take control of the transmitting station. So far, they had refused to negotiate with their children, and the Enterprise was there to get the anarchists to the bargaining table. When Taylani finished, Kirk took a deep breath. He thought of Chiao's beaches and jungles and piercingly blue skies. He felt calm returning. Under Sulu's command, the Excelsior had followed the Enterprise to Prester 5 and learned how Taylani had purchased new weapons and headed to Delston 8 to have them installed. 5 light years from the space docks at Delston 8, Sulu ordered the Excelsior to drop out of warp and come to a relative stop. The trail of the Enterprise had abruptly disappeared. On Excelsior's bridge, Chekhov worked with Spock to reconfigure the main sensors. They had all served with Captain Kirk. He had seen him cover his tracks too many times to think following him would be easy. Finally, Spock looked up from the science station.
Sensors have made contact. Subspace disturbance at bearing 144 Mark 20.
At tactical, Chekhov confirmed the distortion pattern.
It's the Enterprise's warp signature.
The helmsman asked if he should lay in a course to match the new trail. Sulu smiled knowingly.
Negative. If I know Captain Kirk, we should find at least 3 warp trails from this location.
In the end, they found 4. Kirk had looped back 3 times to muddy the subspace waters, laying false trails. Sulu chose to follow the course heading for the Klingon Empire, because who would ever believe Captain Kirk would willingly return there? 5 hours later, the Enterprise's trail ended again, but without a return loop, indicating Kirk had once again dropped from warp to change course. This time they found 3 possible trails. Spock confirmed the method behind Kirk's evasive maneuvers.
It is a feint he has used in chess many times, to hide the true focus of attack through misdirection.
Chekhov looked up from his tactical displays.
It is not like the captain to repeat himself.
Spock agreed.
Logically, we should choose the trail that leads away from the obvious choice.
Spock gave the bearing. The Excelsior smoothly stretched into the infinite realms of warp speed. Chekhov smiled to himself. It was almost like being back on the Enterprise. Then the Excelsior hit a brick wall. The main view screen flared orange-white. Chekhov pulled himself back to his tactical board. His fingers flew over the controls. There was nothing. Nothing. And then, it was on the view screen. 3 Klingon battle cruisers dropped from warp, dead ahead. Uhura shouted over the alarms. "Captain, we're being hailed." On screen, the Klingon commander was young, eager eyes gleaming viciously.
Federation starship, you have intruded in restricted Klingon space. Surrender or die.
Sulu retorted with anger.
Go to hell.
To his crew, he added,
Go to red alert, full power to shields, phasers on standby.
Chekhov read his tactical displays.
All 3 cruisers have locked weapons on us.
Sulu stood to face the view screen.
Klingon Commander, I am Captain Sulu of the starship Excelsior. We are searching for a Federation vessel under the authority of Chancellor Azitbar.
The Klingon blinked.
How dare you invoke the name of our Chancellor for your foul crimes?
I say again, the Excelsior has full diplomatic clearance to conduct her search in Klingon territory. Contact your Central Command for verification. Then I'll be more than happy to accept your apology.
Sulu turned to Uhura.
Close the channel.
McCoy piped up.
I thought Admiral Drake personally cleared all this through Azitbar.
Uhura looked up from her comm station.
Presumably we're about to find out. I'm picking up a flurry of encrypted messages. But that's odd. It's an old code. We can crack it. 2 minutes, maybe 3.
In a few minutes, Uhura announced the computer had decoded the Klingon message to Central Command.
But I don't understand. It's just random bits.
Even Spock was puzzled, but he offered a possible explanation.
The only logical way this message makes sense is if we assume it is a prearranged signal.
Finally, 10 minutes after the Klingon message had been sent, Uhura announced that a reply was returning.
Given the short response time, sir, there must be a command ship nearby.
Sulu returned to his command chair.
On your toes, everyone. What's happening, Uhura? Ship-to-ship communications, all encrypted, sounds like... Sir? They're initiating a countdown.
2 of the Klingon cruisers disappeared from the view screen. Chekhov's sensors told him what had happened.
Damn! We've been englobed!
At warp speed, the 2 cruisers had each positioned themselves from the first cruiser and from each other in a circle around the Excelsior. The Excelsior could run, but the Klingons had made sure that at least 2 or 3 photon torpedoes would impact before she had reached her top speed.
The Klingon commander is hailing us.
Sulu glowered.
Open a channel.
The Klingon commander reappeared on the view screen, sprawled comfortably in his chair.
Captain Sulu of the starship Excelsior, my Central Command has no record of any diplomatic clearance being given to you or your vessel. Prepare to be boarded, or prepare to die.
I know you're lying. We decoded your message. You didn't ask your Central Command.
Cha!
The Klingon disappeared from the screen. Chekhov warned the bridge.
Torpedoes launched.
Instantly, Excelsior rocked with multiple impacts.
Shields at 90%. They're firing again.
Sulu jumped from his command chair and went to the helm.
Engineering, prepare for warp pulse. On my mark. Brace yourself.
Sulu's fingers flew over the controls. Instantly, the single cruiser on the view screen expanded as the Excelsior accelerated forward at the speed of light and swept beneath it, missing the cruiser's shield by only 6 meters. When the warp pulse ended, Excelsior bobbed up behind the cruiser. Then Chekhov saw the torpedo traces on his board. Their targeting computers hadn't been able to make sense of Sulu's maneuvers. The view screen flared white as the Katinga-class cruiser fell victim to the torpedoes launched by its sister ships. Sulu smiled grimly.
2-to-1 odds. We can handle easily. Uhura, open a channel, please.
The clouds of debris were replaced by the astonished face of the Klingon commander.
I am still not looking for a fight. All I want you to do is shut down your warp cores. That way I know it will take you at least 6 hours to power up again before you can follow us.
Suddenly, Chekhov saw the long-range sensor display light up.
Incoming vessel, a Starfleet shuttle.
Uhura looked up from her station, hand to her earpiece.
The shuttle is hailing us, Captain. On screen, Uhura.
It was Admiral Androvar Drake.
Captain Sulu, lower your shield so I can dock.
Sir, We're involved in a firefight with 2 Klingon cruisers. I must request that you withdraw to a safe distance.
Leave the Klingons to me, Captain. I've got a coded message for them from their High Council.
Uhura announced.
The shuttle is transmitting to the Klingon ships a new type of encryption code.
Chekhov watched his board.
They're powering down their weapons, Captain. They are dropping their shields.
Sulu stood up.
Admiral Drake, may I ask what you're doing here?
Drake deflected the question.
I'll come aboard as soon as I dock, Captain. The message I've relayed to the Klingons explains the situation to them and gives them their orders. They're to escort us as we track the Enterprise.
Sulu signaled for Uhura to end the transmission. He looked over to Spock.
Captain Spock, what would you say the odds were for the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet to come this far into Klingon space without an entire flotilla for security? Incalculable, Captain.
As far as Spock could tell, the Excelsior and her crew were no longer tracking Kirk for Starfleet and the good of the Federation. They were hunting him for Admiral Andrever Drake. As Drake's shuttle thudded gently against the Excelsior aft airlock, the computer confirmed a solid docking. In the pilot's chair, Ariadne shut down the maneuvering thrusters. She turned to her father.
The Excelsior destroyed one of our cruisers. How are the mercenaries going to react to that?
Drake got out of his passenger seat.
They've already agreed to betray their empire. Besides, the loss of a third of them means their payment isn't split as many ways. And remember, the Excelsior is on our side.
Father, I wouldn't trust Sulu.
He's a Starfleet officer, and I'm his commander-in-chief. But if I have to, I can replace Sulu as commander of the Excelsior. I can have his entire command crew thrown into the brig. I am Starfleet.
Drake hugged his daughter.
Ariadne, ever since Kirk killed your mother, he has always underestimated me.
Father, the Klingons killed Mother. Drake's face hardened.
Kirk let them get away with it. Once we have control of the Chalche Kume, once I can dangle that before our friends on the Federation Council, war will be inevitable. The Klingon Empire will be crushed, and Kirk with all his bleeding heart sympathizers with it.
He handed Ariadne her flight helmet.
Keep that on, and make certain all the comm images are offline. I'll say my pilot has to stay on alert status in the shuttle in case of emergency evacuation.
Ariadne pulled on her helmet, stuffed her hair into place beneath it. Drake gave his daughter's hand a squeeze.
I'm doing this for you, for the future.
But even as he said that, Ariadne feared her father might become a casualty of the past, fighting a war that had ended years ago. Kirk was one with the night. He leaned his back against the rough bark of an alien tree, listening to the sounds of the jungle around him. He heard nothing that betrayed the presence of the 15 Chiao who moved through the jungle with him, closing in on the anarchist's base. His soldiers. Kirk wished he could take credit for their training, but in truth they had none. Instead, the Chiao's innate abilities to move stealthily seemed to stem from their elaborate childhood games of hunts and chases for the jungle. Tealani and her people apparently had had a typical Klingon and Romulan upbringing. In the jungle, a shadow moved toward Kirk. Making not a sound, Tealani crept up beside him. Like Kirk, she wore the dark jumpsuit that was the uniform of those who fought for Chiao. Unlike Kirk, this was the first time she had faced real battle. Tealani brought out her combat tricorder and showed its display to Kirk. 16 muted green dots were arranged in a half circle around the target's coordinates. Each Chiao was in position. One last time, Kirk reviewed the situation. For years, the city dwellers had kept the advantage of a defensible position and hard technology. The anarchists had taken advantage of the jungle and elaborate jamming devices. Only Mr. Scott's wizardry, with the Enterprise's weakened sensors, had enabled Kirk to locate the anarchist stronghold, 200 kilometers from Chiao's main city. But the stronghold was protected by a complex web of sensor screens, force fields, and jammers. The only way to bring both sides in the conflict together was by direct physical confrontation. He slipped his disruptor from its holster and checked again that it was at its stunned setting. He looked at Tealani, and she reached out to touch Kirk's face, a silent gesture of her feelings. Her hand slid down to his neck. She tugged on the collar of his jumpsuit as if adjusting it. "Now, Teilani." The anarchist's first perimeter line was only 20 meters ahead of them. Teilani cupped a hand to her mouth. She made the sound of a Chiao jungle night feeder. With the signal given, Kirk began moving carefully through the darkness, Teilani at his side. Because of the moon and the stars, the night sky of Chiao was slightly brighter than the stark black shadows of the surrounding trees and the anarchists' watchtowers. The towers were each 5 meters tall, roughly constructed of wood and vines. Surveillance had shown that each held 2 guards linked to the perimeter sensor web. They were Kirk's first target. Teilani repeated the night feeder's cry. 3, 2, 1, go. Kirk and Teilani charged forward. In his mind, he saw his soldiers move in perfect coordination with him. Instantly, the jungle roared to life with disruptors firing as each watchtower was hit by multiple beams. Cries of surprise followed as the anarchists behind the defensive perimeters heard the sensor's alarms. Micro-explosive shells with projectile weapons tore through the compound at Kirk's soldiers, while Kirk knew that the jumpsuits used by the Chiao contained an energy mesh that could dissipate much of the force of a disruptor beam. The explosive shells could kill. But Teilani had told him not to be overly worried. She said that the anarchists were unskilled with weapons and were unlikely to hit anyone they aimed at. Kirk ran past the closest watchtower. Its guards had been stunned as planned. The first stage of the attack was complete. Ahead was a wooden barricade reinforced with metal sheets from old shipping containers. Beyond it, a compound of wooden huts, the anarchists' camp. Teilani swung her projectile gun up, fired a burst of shells set for contact detonation. A section of the barricade disintegrated in flame. Before the smoke had thinned, Kirk had hurled himself toward the opening. He hit the ground on his shoulder, flipped over, and was firing his disruptor even as he came to his feet. 3 anarchists dropped in the orange glow of the disruptor beam. Kirk ran on. He exulted in his renewed vigor. An enormous fireball flared overhead as a munitions crate erupted. Kirk saw dark figures rushing about in confusion, the anarchists completely taken by surprise. Teilani rushed to his side, combat tricorder in hand. "Each team is in. No casualties." Kirk flipped open his communicator. "Scotty, beam in the second wave." Instantly, the warble of the transporter beams blended with the cries and explosions of the compound. In groups of 6, 3 more teams of Chiao took form near the breached barricade. Teilani watched the second wave teams fan out through the compound. "James, it's going perfectly." She ran off to help with the capture of the anarchists. Kirk checked the compound. 10 meters away, a hover truck lifted into the air, its impeller fans whining as it flew straight for him. Unable to see, he fired his disruptor, then dove to the side. The truck crashed, and one of the anarchists leapt from the truck's cargo bed. He saw Kirk and ran at him. He aimed his projectile gun. Kirk was out of options. The disruptor had slipped from his hand as he fell. There was only one thing to do. He charged. The anarchist fired twice, point blank, before Kirk slammed into him. Kirk didn't even hear the whistle of the shells. He only felt the impact of his fist on the anarchist's jaw. The anarchist slumped back. The weapon fell from his hand. Kirk looked down at his chest. The projectiles had missed. For an instant, Kirk remembered Teilani spinning through the air in his parents' barn, a string of projectile explosives missing her by a heartbeat. Kirk reached up to his collar, felt a small, curved metal tube coiled inside the fabric. Teilani had adjusted it just before the attack began. What else was before him that he hadn't seen? Kirk glanced around the anarchists' compound. The fighting had ended. The battle fought and won. But Kirk knew a different war on Chiao was in progress. The device hidden in his collar was proof of it. He hauled the unconscious anarchist to his feet, flipped open his communicator. "Kirk to Enterprise. I've got a prisoner with me, Scotty. I want you to beam us both directly to the brig."
Energizing, Captain.
The dark jungle compound dissolved around Kirk, changing into the bright plain walls of the Enterprise's brig. Kirk's prisoner moaned, coming around. The anarchist shook his head, saw Kirk, stared at him with hatred.
Where have you brought me? You're on the Enterprise, a starship orbiting Chiao.
The anarchist blinked in surprise, took another look around.
A Federation ship? No, it's a private ship serving Teilani. What's your name?
But at mention of Teilani, the anarchist spit at Kirk's feet.
You're in no danger. After we've talked, you're free to return to Chiao. What's your name? Torval. Fine, Torval. How old are you?
Tor was puzzled by the question.
In your standard years, 42.
Kirk studied his prisoner carefully. He saw only a youth no older than 20.
Then it's true, Toril. There's something on Chiao, in the air or the water, that keeps people young. Isn't that the result of living on your world?
Toril smiled with sudden knowledge.
Tell me what Teal'ani told you, human.
It took Kirk only an instant to make his decision.
The colony on Chiao was jointly founded by the Klingons and the Romulans. It was deemed a failure and abandoned by both sides.
Toril snorted in derision.
It was an unqualified success. We weren't abandoned. We were hidden.
Toril stepped closer to the security screen.
We are the children of heaven, the Chachech Khmer.
The Klingon phrase meant nothing to Kirk. Toril held out a hand as if to touch the almost invisible security screen.
Why are you here, human? What business of yours is Chiao? I'm trying to help stop the fighting so this planet will be at peace. Do you want to keep fighting? No, human. I want to destroy Teal'ani and her people. Then the fighting will stop. So you can sell the secret of Chiao to the rest of the galaxy?
Toril actually snarled.
Is that what she told you we were trying to do? Human, we want to bury Chiao, to wipe it out of existence. Why? It's a paradise.
Toril jumped to his feet in rage.
It is an obscenity.
Kirk could not accept that.
I have felt its influence. It's one of the most beautiful worlds I've ever seen, filled with bright, healthy people.
Toril's eyes smoldered with repressed fury.
At what cost? Has Teal'ani shown you the armory? The large building in the center of the city? That's an armory with weapons? If you believe truth is a weapon.
Kirk had had enough.
What is the truth?
Toril seemed to age before Kirk's eyes. His shoulders slumped.
For what I am going to tell you, please forgive me. Remember that in decades past, our people were manipulated by their rulers to hate you, to consider your species as nothing more than animals.
Toril sat down on the bench and wept with shame. Then a new voice rang out in the brig.
Mr. Kirk, stand back.
Kirk spun around. 2 Chiao stood in the doorway leading to the corridor. Each held a disruptor aimed past Kirk. Kirk recognized them. The attackers from the farm. The attackers who had died. He stepped in front of Toril, blocking the attackers' line of sight. An instant later, Kirk felt himself fly backward, each nerve on fire, with the all-too-familiar sting of a disruptor set to stun. The attackers walked past him. Kirk forced himself to turn his head just in time to see 2 disruptor beams hit Toril. The attackers looked down at Kirk. Reluctantly, they put away their weapons. Kirk sensed a third person entering the brig. Teal'ani. She knelt by him.
It's over, James. They're our prisoners now. All of them. Thanks to you, we've won.
As the darkness claimed Kirk, he thought he could still hear Toril weeping. When James Kirk woke, he felt a cool cloth press against his forehead. A face hovered close to his, Teal'ani's. He rolled off the bed, pushing his way through the filmy gauze that hung around it. He was in Teal'ani's house. He stood naked on the cool tiled floors. He moved his arms and shoulders. No trace of any injury from the disruptor stun. Teal'ani slipped off the bed, wearing only a wrap of fabric as transparent as the gauze around the bed. His heart ached more than he could bear. But Teal'ani was the enemy now.
Where are my clothes?
She smiled playfully, oblivious to his mood.
Come to bed, James. I want to see if you've fully recovered.
But Kirk turned from her, went to a wooden chest. Inside were his civilian clothes from Earth. He began to put them on.
Teal'ani, the attackers at the farm, they were your people, not anarchists.
Teal'ani moved closer to Kirk, slipped her arms around him.
How could they be? They tried to kill you.
He twisted away from her.
The game's over. They couldn't kill me.
He tore at the collar of the jumpsuit, ripped out the silver coil of metal hidden in it.
Some sort of force field emitter, isn't it? Diverts the projectiles.
Teal'ani stood her ground.
But James, at the farm, you saw me get shot. I saw you tug on your collar just as you turned your back to the window in the kitchen. A second later, the shot grazed your shoulder. James, you don't have to think about this. The anarchists' threat has ended. The anarchist in the brig was shot by the same two Chiao who were at the farm. You must have some innate Vulcan abilities on your Romulan side. Meditative control of the autonomic system. Is that it? Makes your heart stop for a few minutes to fool the human into helping out?
Kirk reached out to touch her face.
I can see now how well you played me. First you threw yourself at me, but I said no. So a minute later we were running for our lives, fighting side by side. And then you offered me a challenge when I didn't have one. You offered me a chance to save your world. That's my job, Taylani. That's what I do. Who I am. I couldn't refuse you, and you knew it.
Taylani raised her voice.
I want to hear you say you don't love me.
Kirk didn't take his eyes from hers.
I love my work.
Taylani slapped him. Her Klingon nails raked his cheek.
Taylani, I can still help you. There is a secret on this world that I think even you don't know about.
Taylani's face twisted in anger.
What lies did the anarchist tell you? Have you ever been in the armory?
He saw her flinch.
What's in there, Taylani?
She turned away from him.
I don't know.
Kirk was surprised to sense she was telling the truth.
Then go there with me.
He felt her shiver.
Why won't you just accept that you've done what you were supposed to do? We've won. Chiao is safe. You can stay here and be young with me forever. I know you love me. Taylani, that's not enough.
Kirk pulled his communicator from his jacket, opened it, acknowledged the call.
Scotty here, Captain. I'm picking up vessels approaching at high warp. At least two of them are Klingon. From their power curves, I'd have to say they were battle cruisers.
How soon until they're here, Scotty?
Only 6 minutes. These sensors aren't the same as the old ones.
Taylani held a hand over the communicator.
You didn't stop the anarchists in time after all. Are those Klingon ships coming here to destroy Chiao? That's why we wanted you to have a starship, fully armed and shielded.
Kirk pulled the communicator away from her.
Scotty, beam me directly to the bridge.
Will that be one to beam up?
Kirk stepped back from Taylani.
1, Mr. Scott.
But as soon as he said those words, Kirk knew Taylani would take them as a challenge. The beam dissolved him just as she fell into his arms. Scotty blinked in embarrassment as Taylani stepped away from Kirk on the bridge of the Enterprise. Her transparent wrap offered little more than the suggestion of clothes. Kirk took the center chair. The child at communications turned to Kirk.
I believe we're being hailed, sir.
Kirk opened the channel and turned to the view screen, nearly jumping from his chair in surprise. It was Sulu.
Captain Kirk. Good to see you again.
Sulu, are you traveling with the Klingons?
We're being escorted, sir.
I see. Is this a social visit?
Sulu was about to answer, but he sat back as someone else moved into view. It was Drake. Kirk knew better than to turn his back on Drake for an instant.
You're a long way from home, Admiral. Anything I should know about?
Sorry, Jim. This is Starfleet business. I'm here under the combined authority of Starfleet and the Klingon High Council.
Authority to do what?
That's classified, Jim.
Scotty announced to Kirk.
The ships have dropped from warp. They're moving to match our orbit.
Drake remained silent for a few moments longer, then spoke over his shoulder to Sulu.
Captain, send down the security details to secure the city.
Kirk had no idea what Drake was up to, but he was going to stop him.
Mr. Scott, I want a level 7 photon discharge into the ionosphere over the city.
Scotty didn't question the order. The bridge rumbled with the launching of 3 photon torpedoes, one after the other. Kirk received another surprise when he heard Spock's voice come from the Excelsior bridge.
Admiral Drake, the Enterprise has created an area of high ionization over the Chiao City. We will be unable to beam anyone down for at least 20 minutes.
Spock, is that you?
Spock stepped on screen behind Sulu.
Greetings, Captain.
Then McCoy stepped on from the other side.
Fancy meeting you here, Jim.
Drake cut in.
This isn't a reunion, Jim. This is a Starfleet matter. I'm ordering you to withdraw.
I'm not a Starfleet officer. This is not a Starfleet vessel. You are not in Federation space.
Scotty spun around from his tactical board.
Captain, the Klingons are bringing their weapons online.
Drake grinned coldly.
I'm now advising you that you are operating an illegally armed vessel in a restricted area of Klingon space. I'm suggesting you withdraw from this system or face the consequences.
Kirk had had enough.
Sulu, what is that pompous ass going on about?
Drake raised his hand as if to give an order to fire, but Sulu stepped down from his chair.
Captain Kirk, I know this is an awkward position for all of us to be in, but Starfleet is in possession of classified information suggesting that Chiao could pose a threat to the peace process between the Federation and the Empire. My orders are to dispatch security teams to the planet's surface and secure any war material we find. We do have the authority from the Empire, sir.
That information made several pieces fall together to form a pattern. Drake wanted war material. The central structure in the city was an armory. Kirk watched Drake carefully.
Would this have anything to do with the Chal-Chej-Khmer?
Drake's eyes darkened.
What do you know about the Chal-Chej-Khmer?
Enough to know that I'm not letting you get near it. Captain Sulu, you're in violation of Chal orbital space. I ask you to withdraw.
Sulu bit his lip and looked at Drake.
Captain Sulu, the Enterprise is a threat to this mission. I am ordering you to neutralize that threat.
Reluctantly, Sulu complied.
Weapons officer, target the Enterprise's impulse thrusters.
Kirk knew Sulu had no choice. Kirk closed the channel to the Excelsior and brought a tactical display up on the view screen.
Navigator, set course bearing 85 Mark 0. Full impulse, Mr. Scott, now.
The Enterprise shuddered as she blazed towards Chiao. Taylani held onto Kirk's chair as the bridge bucked, and the air screamed as the ship descended through the atmosphere.
Entering the zone of ionization, Captain. How long can we stay in it, Scotty? 30 seconds, Captain.
Taylani held onto Kirk's arm.
James, what are you doing? Disappearing. They won't be able to lock onto us through the ionized area we've made. A few seconds will be long enough. Prepare for warp, Mr. Scott. Navigator, set course bearing 245 Mark 180. Warp 1, now!
The Enterprise groaned as she was suddenly torn from the atmosphere of Chiao at the speed of light, traveling back on a reverse course that would put her only a few hundred kilometers behind the Excelsior and her Klingon escorts.
Take out those Klingons, Mr. Scott. Photon torpedoes, full spread.
Scotty fired the torpedoes, overloading the Klingons' aft shields.
The Excelsior's coming about, Captain. Put the Klingons between her and us and fire full disruptors.
The orange beams blasted forth from the Enterprise's saucer. It passed through the first battlecruiser's shields as if they weren't there. The cruiser's main hull blew apart in a string of small explosions as her antimatter containment bottles failed. Taylani asked him what happened.
They assumed we had phasers and set the shields accordingly.
He reopened a channel to the Excelsior.
Excelsior, once again, I ask you to withdraw.
Drake's reply was emotionless.
You're dead, Kirk. Do you hear me? Weapons officer, retarget the Enterprise. All phasers on the bridge.
Admiral Drake, am I to understand that you've just given orders to destroy a ship belonging to a sovereign world because it has tried to preserve its territorial integrity?
Kirk, your atoms will orbit Chiao until its suns go nova.
Mr. Spock, isn't Admiral Drake's order a violation of Starfleet's general policy?
Spock stepped up beside Drake and raised an eyebrow.
Technically, a case could be made that the Admiral's orders are in violation of Starfleet command directives.
Drake sprang to his feet.
Fire, Daniel, fire, or you'll all be charged with mutiny.
Sulu returned to the view screen.
Admiral Drake, with respect, sir, you are in violation of Starfleet command directives. I must request that you relinquish command of this vessel in order that we may convene a general inquiry.
Drake looked at each of the former Enterprise officers assembled before him. Without any trace of emotion, he stepped down.
You will hold the inquiry now.
Sulu took over his chair.
After we have withdrawn from the system, Captain Kirk, this could take several hours, but I suspect we will be returning after that.
The view screen flashed back to an image of Chiao. The Excelsior streaked away into warp. There was no trace of the second Klingon cruiser, only debris from the first. Scotty spun around in his chair.
I swear you have the luck of the devil. Wrong afterworld, Mr. Scott. This is heaven, remember?
Kirk got up and went to Taylani.
You know the lies have to end now, don't you? Your anarchist had nothing to do with what just happened here. Whatever secrets you're trying to hide, you're no longer in control of them. What is the Chal-Chej-Khmer?
Teolani took a deep breath.
I don't know, James. It's whatever is in the armory. And you've never been there?
She shook her head.
I'm afraid, James. That's part of growing up. And that's what you have to do now. Let's go down to the armory.
Kirk took her hand. The future waited for both of them. When Kirk and Teolani took their positions on the transporter pads in the Enterprise, Kirk still wore his civilian clothes, though he was outfitted with a disruptor pistol, a communicator, and combat tricorder. Teolani had changed into a jumpsuit, similarly equipped. Scotty adjusted his controls at the operator's console.
Locked onto the armory's coordinates. It's a large installation, extends underground through almost the entire city. Any sign of power generators? Aye, but they only make up about a fraction of what's down there.
Scotty looked puzzled.
It's a sly little trick. They got a transporter shield over the place, hidden in the power generator field so it would disperse any beam that struck it before an operator could recover. But someone's gone to a lot of trouble to keep visitors out. But the modulation routines are fairly old-fashioned.
His finger tapped over the controls.
We're through. In that case, Scotty, keep a lock on us the whole time we're down there, and energize.
When a new location formed around Kirk, he was in utter darkness, Teolani beside him.
Don't move. We'll ask Mr. Scott to beam down some lights.
Suddenly, lights flickered far ahead, 200 meters at least, a geodesic pattern of light channels. Kirk could see there was something hanging above him, directly overhead, blocking almost half the ceiling from his view. A Romulan bird of prey. An old one. Teolani stared up at it.
James, what is it? An old Romulan starship. But why would they bury a starship?
100 meters away, new lights were coming on. They seemed to originate from within a series of transparent display cases, which ringed the wide plaza on which Kirk and Teolani now stood. By the time Kirk saw what was in the first display case, though, the armory's purpose was becoming clearer.
Teolani, it's a museum.
The display before them contained a mannequin, outfitted in Romulan warrior's uniform. Mounted beside it, a series of hand weapons were also on exhibit. There was a white floor panel before the display case. Kirk's tricorder identified a pressure mechanism under it. Kirk tapped his boot against the panel. A screen lit up above the display case. Teolani explained,
It's in Romulan, explaining how to use the weapon.
She looked startled.
It says there are 10,000 of those hand disruptors stored here. This armory is not a museum. It's a munitions dump.
James, for what purpose? Kirk shrugged.
War. With me. The Federation. 40 years ago, the Romulans and the Klingons must have been preparing for an all-out war with the Federation, so they founded Chiao to be a secret supply base.
Teolani began walking along the curve of the cases. Each pressure panel she stepped on began an informational sequence. Dozens of screens lit up in the armory. Spotlights flared and dimmed on hand weapons, medical equipment, computer consoles, ration containers, navigation and communication devices, protective clothing, tactical bombs, enough supplies for an army. One of the screens would no doubt contain the information for opening the roof of the armory and flying the bird of prey skyward. Teolani had moved ahead of him. He saw her in front of the first display case in a series. He went to her side. The mannequins were more lifelike in the display. A Romulan male and Klingon female held a baby. The baby had a furrowed brow, pointed ears. A holographic projection came to life. DNA molecules spun within it. Another display showed egg cells being opened up by microscalpels so their dark nuclei could be replaced with new ones. Teolani looked at her hands.
We were genetically engineered.
Kirk put his hand on her shoulder.
There's no shame in that, Teolani.
She shrugged loose from his touch, turned around the corner. He heard her gasp. Another curve of display cases ran there. Teolani leaned against the 10th case, her fist against the clear panel. Kirk glanced into the display cases as he passed them. Holographic images flashed before him. Federation starships laying waste to planets. Romulan and Klingon cities in ruins. Scenarios for battles feared but never fought. Among the holographically constructed ruins, the Chiao emerged. The Chiao worked amongst the ruins, lived amongst the ruins, as a devastated world was rebuilt. Kirk stopped a few meters from Teolani. Don't you see? You're not genetically engineered to fight. You're genetically engineered to thrive in environments polluted by energy radiation, biological warfare agents. You're survivors. Kirk understood the Klingon phrase now. Chalchech Khmer. The children of heaven. All that is good. But Teolani shook her head. Kirk moved to her side and saw the holographic displays that held her mesmerized. He felt his stomach tighten. Genetic engineering was only one part of what made the Chiao so fit, so strong, so impervious to injury. There had also been operations, transplants of tissues and organs from humans. This case displayed real-time images of men and women, some in 40-year-old Starfleet uniforms, butchered by alien surgeons for the organic material necessary to create each child of heaven. Teolani threw herself into Kirk's arms.
Forgive me. The anarchists are right. Chiao must be destroyed.
Kirk turned his eyes from the atrocities before him. The origin of Chiao could not be forgotten, but the innocent could not be punished with the guilty.
Teolani, we're not responsible for the world we're born into, only for the world we leave when we die.
Teolani's fingers pressed against the display case.
How can I change this? You can't. The point is to change what we can, to leave this universe so that others can make it even better, not to turn away from the challenges it gives us. Show me how, James. Show me how not to turn away. I don't know if the child can live with their secret, but I can help them try.
Teolani forced a smile through her tears.
Thank you, James, for being the hero we needed, that I needed.
Suddenly, a stranger's harsh voice came from behind them.
Drop your weapons and raise your hands.
Kirk and Teolani spun around to face a human woman whose drawn phaser was leveled at them. Kirk had no idea how long she might have been in the armory with them.
Who the hell are you? What a fitting choice of words. I'm Ariadne Drake, and that's where you're headed.
Kirk saw the resemblance, knew who she must be.
Can't your father fight his own battles?
Ariadne flashed a cold and unfeeling smile.
You aren't a battle, Kirk. You're a mopping-up exercise. Move away from the display case.
Teolani looked at Kirk. He shook his head.
Isn't that touching? You're willing to die for each other. For my world. What world? Child is a test tube, and you're just a medical experiment.
Kirk knew he could never draw his disruptor fast enough to drop Ariadne before she fired, so he didn't move. The only reason he could see for why Ariadne didn't shoot right away was because she was worried about damaging whatever was in the case. He thought he could use that against her.
You'll never learn what's in it, Ariadne. I already know it's there. I've been watching you and recording since you got here and activated the displays. You see, they aren't triggered by human life signs, only by animals like her. The Chiao are not animals.
Ariadne's cool glance chilled him.
You've seen how they were bred, how they were manufactured. If you can still believe they're human, then my father was right about you. You've lost whatever fire you had, along with your honor.
Ariadne looked at Teolani.
Kirk lied to you about why he came here. He's been at war with the Klingon Empire and the Romulans since before you were born. That war is over and done with. Put down your phaser, Ariadne. There's nothing here for you. Oh, yes, there is. I want what you came for. Eternal youth. There is no youth here.
Teolani looked at Kirk, confused.
But James, you said you felt younger. You are younger.
Kirk couldn't help smiling in spite of Ariadne's phaser.
You didn't give me any choice. Keeping up with you is like training for a marathon. The Chiao have been genetically engineered for health and youth. Their bodies' systems have been augmented by transplants.
Ariadne interrupted.
Human transplants. And that works both ways. Eternal youth from the combination of Klingon and Romulan genetics and human tissue. For the process to work on us, all we will need will be transplants from the Chiao.
Teolani grabbed Kirk's arm.
James, is that true?
Kirk's expression confirmed her fears. Ariadne gloated.
See, that's all you are to Kirk. That's all any of the Chiao are to humans. Cattle, bred as a source of transplant tissues.
Teolani looked at Kirk with an expression of betrayal.
Did you know about us, James? No. I came here because of you, Teolani.
Ariadne tried to reinforce Teolani's doubts.
But who brought you to the armory? Teolani. Kirk did. Because of the library computer. He knows it has all the medical files he needs to understand the process that created you, so he can be young forever.
Teolani had no defenses against the poison Ariadne spewed, but Kirk did. He took Teolani into his arms and hissed a question into her ear.
How long can you stop your heart? 3 minutes, maybe 4. If you want to know the truth, do it.
Teolani slumped to the floor. In the absence of Klingon-Romulan life signs, the lights of the armory cut out. Instantly, Kirk was enveloped in absolute darkness. He heard Ariadne swear, heard her phaser beep as she adjusted its power settings. By then, his disruptor was in his hand and he fired, full power. In the strobe-like flashes of the weapon's discharge, the display case exploded. Kirk dropped to the floor, skidded to the side as Ariadne fired a stun burst where he had been standing. He fired again, into the data complex. A chain reaction sped along the gray panels behind the row of cases. He heard Ariadne's boots charge across the stone. The lights in the armory began to power up again. Kirk ran to Teolani as she returned to consciousness. I destroyed the computer. Teolani stared at him intently, seeking truth. And you destroyed the secret that could have made you young forever. Kirk heard Ariadne curse. He left Teolani and ran to where Ariadne had broken the transparent panel of a different display case, stepped into it. There was a library computer console inside. She was frantically trying to pull data chips from it. The flames flickered at its side. The metal was blistering hot. Ariadne's fingers were streaked with blood. Kirk reached through the shattered panel and pulled her out. She kicked and struggled in his grip. You fool! You don't know what you've done! Yes, I do. He grabbed Ariadne's phaser from her belt. It was set to kill. But before he could adjust it, he heard a transporter cascade begin. 5 meters away, 4 columns of orange light took form. Klingons. And Androvor Drake was with them. Kirk held the phaser to Ariadne's head, but the 3 Klingons aimed the disruptors at Kirk as if Ariadne weren't present. Drake simply smiled.
Go ahead, Jimbo. Press the firing stud. At this range, even stun can be fatal.
Ariadne didn't struggle against Kirk's chokehold.
I'm ready to die for what I believe in.
Admiral Drake folded his hands behind his back.
Like father, like daughter, eh, Jimbo?
Teolani ran to Kirk's side.
What's keeping you, Jimbo? Oh, that's right, I forgot. You're the famous starship captain who chokes when it counts. Drake, I'm not in Starfleet anymore. I've got nothing to lose.
Drake advanced a step.
Except your nerve. Isn't that right, Jimbo? Like when you hesitated on Tycho 4? I did the right thing on Tycho 4, Drake, more than you know.
The Klingons began to spread out, keeping Kirk, Ariadne, and Teolani in their crossfire. Admiral Drake looked up at the distant ceiling, admiring the bird of prey.
28 years ago, Kirk, stardate 3198.4. Doesn't that ring a bell? I was in the Kalanora sector. 2 Klingon battle cruisers had picked off a Starfleet hospital ship, said it was on a spying mission. Women and children were on that ship. My wife was on that ship. We were at war. I chased those Klingon ships. The Code 1 signal went out.
Kirk tightened his grip around Ariadne's shoulders and neck. It was clear the Klingons were going to try and stun him from different angles at once. It was a risky strategy. Even in the face of heavy disruptor fire, Kirk would be able to fire his phaser.
Drake, that war never went anywhere. Because of you, Kirk. You brought the Organians into the war, and the Organians stopped it before it could begin, before I could punish the Klingons who killed my wife. If your Klingons fire now, you'll be killing your own daughter. But I'll be able to take revenge on the one responsible, won't I?
Drake shook his head in scorn.
Now, either kill my daughter or drop your weapon. For once in your life, do something.
Kirk dropped the phaser, kicked it away, released Ariadne. Teolani stayed at his side. Drake walked over to retrieve Ariadne's phaser. He waved the phaser at Teolani. "That's all right, Teolani. The charade is over. You can come back to me now." Kirk looked into Teolani's eyes. The flames from the display case and the data conduits flashed madly in them, along with the truth. "I'm sorry, James. Drake told me you wouldn't understand, but my people needed help to survive the anarchists' attack. Drake said the Federation couldn't get involved in the Klingon-Romulan matter. He said you were retiring, that you'd accept the challenge." Drake snickered. "I gave her your psyche file. You were an open book." Kirk raised Teolani's hand to his lips and kissed it. "You did what you had to do." Then Kirk turned to face Drake. "I think I can put the rest together. How you needed someone not involved in Starfleet to locate Chiao. But I'm curious. What were you going to do with the Children of Heaven process? Bribe Federation officials with eternal youth? Get them to overturn treaties? Stop the peace talks?" "Everyone has a price, Jimbo. Yours has always been your vanity. But yes, throw in a few assassinations, a border incident or two, and the paranoia so recently buried in humanity will come back in force, I guarantee it. Under my guidance, my vision, the Federation will become stronger than ever before. It's the only way it can survive." Kirk slipped his arm around Teolani, holding her closely to him. "Study your history, Drake. If threats of war, bribery, and murder are the only way the Federation can survive, then it doesn't deserve to." Drake smiled, handed his phaser to his daughter. "That kind of attitude only proves your cowardice, Jimbo. You know what your problem is? You just can't see the future. Never have, never will." "I can see the future well enough." Kirk tugged at the lapel of his jacket. "Beam us up, Scotty." As the armory dissolved into energy around him, Kirk had the fleeting impression of a phaser beam crackling through the space he had occupied a heartbeat before. Drake had lost his battle. Now it was time he lost the war. Kirk and Teolani stepped down from the transporter platform the instant the beam released him. "Scotty, tell whoever's on communication to raise the Excelsior. We have to get a message to Starfleet Command now." Scotty grinned from behind the transporter console. "I think you better talk to communications yourself, sir." Kirk wasn't in the mood for games. "Kirk to bridge."
Spock here, Captain.
"Spock, what are you doing here?"
It appears I am awaiting your orders.
Scotty shrugged.
Captain Spock and the others thought you might need a wee bit of help. It's like old home week if you ask me.
Kirk told Teolani to follow him. He ran out the doors toward the closest turbolift. He was on the bridge in less than a minute. Spock was in the center chair, vacating it the instant Kirk stepped from the turbolift. Uhura was at what was left of communications. Chekhov was at tactical, and McCoy was trying to stay out of the way at the engineering station. The Enterprise was suddenly rocked with the impact of a direct disruptor hit. Kirk jumped into his chair.
Red alert, full shields, Chekhov, report. Drake has transported back to the Klingon vessel, Captain. He is attacking.
Kirk gripped the arms of his chair as the Enterprise rocked again.
Spock, what happened after the Excelsior withdrew? Admiral Drake did not pursue our insubordination with a formal inquiry. Mr. Chekhov, see what they've got. Fire.
On the main view screen, the Klingon battlecruiser shuddered as its shields flared in a sphere of glowing orange light.
Their shields are tuned to disruptor fire. Photon torpedoes, Mr. Chekhov. Target their port nacelle. Torpedoes loaded, sir. Fire at will, Mr. Chekhov.
2 explosions flared off the Klingon shields.
Their shields are at 90%, as are ours. So, Spock, we're evenly matched. Not exactly. We do have the Excelsior standing by. Uhura, hail Captain Sulu.
An instant later, Sulu was on the main screen.
Captain Kirk, I believe I owe you an apology.
None needed, Captain Sulu. I am well aware of the chain of command. As a starship captain, you had no other choice. Uhura, hail the Klingon vessel. Sulu flickered off the view screen to be replaced by Drake.
Do you want to hear my terms for your surrender, Jimbo?
That won't be necessary, Drake. Captain Sulu, take out the Klingons' nacelles, please. Drake gripped the sides of his chair as the Klingon bridge twisted under the Excelsior's phaser barrage.
As far as I'm concerned, Kirk, you lost the fight the day you arrived.
The view screen cut back to an image of near space in Chiao's orbit. Drake's battlecruiser began to bank.
Sir, his warp engines are powering up.
Kirk was puzzled. It wasn't like Drake to run from a fight. Then the Klingon ship stretched into a rainbow streak. It was gone.
Heading, Mr. Chekhov. Out of our system, sir. No obvious destination.
A few moments later, Spock looked up from his viewers.
The Admiral is moving into a slingshot trajectory.
Kirk pounded his fist against the arm of his chair.
He's attempting to go back through time, probably to ambush us a week ago, before I had a chance to destroy the library computer in the armory. That's what he meant when he said I had lost the day I arrived here.
Kirk turned back to the view screen.
Captain Sulu, has any ship of the Excelsior's design ever undergone a temporal slingshot maneuver?
Grimly, Sulu shook his head.
Only the Enterprise has done that.
Kirk smiled at Sulu.
What do you say, Captain? One last time around the block?
Sulu grinned.
I've always wanted to say that. Stand by, Enterprise.
The view screen jumped back to show Chiao. Taylani turned to Kirk.
James, I don't understand. Sulu has navigated us through the slingshot maneuver several times.
The transporter beam formed before the view screen. Sulu stepped from it.
Request permission to come aboard.
Then he went straight to the navigator station.
Captain Sulu, lay in an intercept course and proceed. With any luck, we'll intercept Drake before he snaps around the sun.
Sulu manipulated the helm controls and Chiao fell away from the view screen. The stars began to smear as Enterprise jumped toward them. Sulu warned them.
We're going to hit some gravimetric turbulence. That's a binary sun.
Kirk nodded.
The Klingon ship's not built for this kind of action. Just get us within disruptor range so we can spoil his trajectory. Uhura, keep us in touch with the Excelsior. We'll want her in position when Drake comes around the primary star.
Kirk kept his eyes fixed on the view screen. Chiao's binary sun began to fill it. Spock reported.
Drake is close to temporal dislocation. Faster, Captain Sulu. Lock disruptors, Mr. Chekhov.
The view screen blazed with the yellow primary and orange secondary sun. The plasma bridge between them writhed like a living creature. Sulu shouted,
Entering the plasma bridge!
Now the view screen was filled with twisting tendrils of superheated plasma, the surface of the smaller star being peeled away by the awesome gravitational forces of the larger sun. Slicing through those tendrils, Drake's ship was a dark dagger. Scotty looked up from the station.
Shield's at 73% and falling. She cannot take these temperatures for long.
Kirk finally gave the order.
Fire!
The view screen flared with flickering disruptor feedback. Spock confirmed their success.
Drake's ship has dropped from warp. He did not achieve temporal dislocation.
On the view screen, Drake's ship cartwheeled slowly through the plasma streams, disappearing into a wall of seething light. Kirk scanned the glowing patterns of braided light on the view screen.
Where is he, Mr. Spock? There is no sign of the Klingon ship, Captain, but our sensor capabilities are degrading. The exterior temperature is in excess of 30,000 degrees Kelvin. If Drake's shields have failed, physical debris could exist for only a few seconds at most.
Kirk wiped at the sweat on his forehead.
Then we have to assume that he's in here with us. How are we doing, Scotty? Not too well, sir. Our radiation shields can only take another 20 minutes of this punishment, so we'll have to pull out in 10. We cannot go to full impulse in this kind of environment. We can't afford to reduce our shields even a tiny bit to vent our impulse exhaust, so we're limited to no more than 10%. Did you hear that, Captain Sulu? We have 10 minutes to find Drake.
McCoy moved around to where Kirk could see him.
Jim, is that a good idea to keep looking? What if he's already out of here?
Spock spoke from his science station.
Unlikely, Doctor. Drake knows the Excelsior is still on patrol.
Kirk listened carefully to each word Spock said, but he didn't take his eyes off the view screen. The plasma threads flowed past the Enterprise like glowing currents of luminous water. Kirk thought of Chiao, the way the waves rippled up on the beach. Then the view screen flared brilliant white, and even as Kirk flew from his chair, he knew his ship had been hit by a photon torpedo. Ariadne turned around from her weapon station on the bridge of the Klingon cruiser.
Direct hits!
Drake leaned forward in his command chair. In the scintillating whirls and eddies of the plasma bridge between the stars was one dark, spinning spot dead ahead. The Enterprise, with James T. Kirk trapped helplessly inside her.
Navigator, take us in. I want a clear view.
The science officer said uncertainly,
Admiral, may I remind you that our shields are only at 42%. We cannot last much longer than the Federation vessel.
On the screen, Drake saw the Enterprise slowly turning in the pressure of the raging plasma currents.
Father, why don't we finish him off? Another torpedo will overload his shields, then we can leave this place with a margin of safety.
Drake nodded.
Very well. Stand by on torpedo, but hail Kirk for me. I want him to know who's responsible. The Enterprise is not responding. Her shields are fluctuating. She's gone into overload.
Plasma sparks jumped along the Enterprise's nacelles. Ariadne kept up her calm commentary.
There go her generators. Emergency batteries coming online. They'll only be good for a few seconds. Structural integrity field is overcompensating. Hull breach.
The saucer buckled. For a breathless moment, the bridge dome rose out of the saucer's center as the outer rim shattered like ice. Then the saucer tore itself apart like a starship made of sand, crushed by an unstoppable wave. In seconds, all that remained of the Enterprise was a river of sparkling, incandescent wreckage, flaring as the plasma reduced it to glowing, disassociated ions. Drake stumbled back to his chair. His uniform was drenched. It was over. Kirk was defeated. The science officer looked up from the station.
Admiral, we're being hailed.
Drake shrugged. He had been expecting this.
The Excelsior? No, sir. It's Kirk.
Ariadne paled as her father screamed. His anger was a match for the torrent of plasma they rode. Kirk stepped forward as Androver Drake appeared on the Excelsior's main view screen. Drake's face was contorted with emotion.
Kirk! I saw you die!
No one died, Admiral. You only saw the Enterprise go out in a blaze of glory, just the way you wanted.
Then Kirk changed the subject.
Admiral, I want you to tune your shields to reflect radiation only. We're going to have to beam you and your crew to the Excelsior.
You couldn't fool a midshipman with that tactic, Jimbo.
It's not a tactic. We're monitoring the status of your shields. They won't last long enough to let you leave the plasma bridge.
Drake sat rigidly at attention in his chair.
Every time we've gone head-to-head, I've beaten you, Jimbo. Now it's come down to whose vision of the Federation is going to survive.
Ariadne moved into view, said something in Drake's ear. Chekhov and Uhura both reacted with surprise.
That's Jade, the rogue agent.
Kirk quickly explained.
She's Drake's daughter.
Then he turned his attention back to Drake.
Admiral, please, if not for yourself, then for your crew, for your daughter.
Drake ignored Kirk's plea and spoke to Ariadne.
Set a course for the rendezvous point. We'll deal with the Excelsior when we've been reinforced. Full impulse till we're out of the plasma, then maximum warp.
Admiral, you can't do that. Full impulse will overload your shields.
Kirk turned to a science officer.
Tell her, Spock. Tell her what readings to look for. Check the radiation pressure on your aft shields. You will see it is out of balance and will not withstand impulse venting.
Ariadne moved off screen. Drake pointed forward. His voice was hoarse but sure.
Take us out. See you in hell, Jimbo.
The image from the Klingon bridge winked out. The view screen showed the Klingon battlecruiser flare as its shields failed. The cruiser expanded in all directions at once, dissolving in a shower of sparks. One of them was Drake. One of them was Drake's child, Ariadne. Tealani took Kirk's hand.
He believed you, James, about the shields. I saw it in his eyes. So why could he not accept your offer to save you? Once Drake was a starship captain. And starship captains think they're invincible. Why, James?
Kirk smiled sadly, proudly.
Because they have to be. It's their job.
Trailing streamers of fire, the Excelsior came about. It flew for Chiao. The twin suns of Chiao were setting. They cast long shadows on the beach. Kirk found Teolani there. She wore the loose white tunic of Chiao, her legs drawn up, arms wrapped around them, staring out at the deepening red of the sky. He sat beside her, wordlessly gave her his gift. She unwrapped the cloth he had bundled around the thin, rectangular object. It was a metal plaque. Teolani ran her fingers across the raised letters. USS Enterprise. To boldly go where no man has gone before. Kirk smiled knowingly. They're going to change that on the next one. Teolani held the plaque to her heart. I'm going to miss you, James. The price we pay, Teolani, for loving what we cannot keep forever. Teolani's eyes shone with unshed tears. If you love me, then don't leave. Kirk held her. He had always known this moment would come. Even when his heart had dared dream of eternal youth, his mind had known that nothing truly lasted forever. The knowledge of death was the price to be paid for the knowledge of being alive. Teolani, Chiao needs you. There'll be a Federation task force here within the month. They'll help you do all that you must do to make this world your own. He touched her hair again, shining waves. Then he let go the dream, turned away, continued his journey alone. The long shadows of the setting suns made his footsteps in the sand deep and dark, unmistakable. The stars above began to flicker in the twilight, as if guiding his way. Teolani watched as Kirk dissolved into glittering light, reclaimed by those stars until only his footsteps remained. He would live in her heart forever. And as Kirk walked away, he didn't know what the universe had in store for him next, or for how long his own journey would continue. But he knew, at last, he was ready to face it. Forever young. Night had fallen, and the stars encompassed all the sky of Viridian 3. Spock spoke softly to those stars now. I am now, and will always be your friend. Goodbye, Jim. It was time for Spock to move on with his own journey. Then Spock's ears heard the faint chirp of a communicator badge. Riker spoke, his words indistinct on the night air. The starship, which was to transport Kirk's remains, was overdue. No doubt, Spock concluded, Riker was receiving an update. Spock's communicator vibrated silently against his wrist. Spock here. It was Riker.
Ambassador, there appears to be some trouble at the salvage site. I'm going to have to ask you to remain here while we beam back to check the situation.
Of course, Commander. What is the nature of the trouble?
I'm not sure. It sounds as if they're under attack.
The area around Kirk's grave lit up as Riker and the honor guard were beamed away. Spock glanced up at the stars, calculating the likely position of ships in standard orbits. Streaks of multicolored energy discharged between them, starships in orbital battle. But except for the moving lights in the sky, the night remained silent and still. As the battle in space still raged above him, he could identify the distinctive blue signature of Starfleet phasers. But the return fire was unidentifiable. The situation presented an interesting set of problems, but he was interrupted in his calculations. Something large was approaching through the sky. Spock rose to his feet, scanned the dark horizon, trying to identify the presence of a flying craft operating without running lights. He could see nothing, but his robes began to swirl around him, blown about by some kind of backwash. Directly above him, the stars wavered, and then were blacked out by a silhouette of something he couldn't identify. A sudden light danced at the edge of his vision. He looked down the slope toward Kirk's grave. Amber rays spiked out from between the rocks of the simple cairn. The light emanating from Kirk's grave brightened, then began to fade. Spock clearly heard the sound of rocks falling against themselves. Among the stars, the signs of a space battle had ended. Spock drew an emergency light from his belt and made his way down the slope to Kirk's grave. The rocks had fallen in. The grave was empty. It was not at all logical. But for a moment, a most improbable thought came to him as he looked to the stars. Perhaps some journeys were never meant to end. There were always possibilities.
Star Trek: The Ashes of Eden was written by William Shatner with Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens and was read by William Shatner. It was adapted for audio by George Truitt. The recording engineer was Barry Goldberg, with tape editing by Steven Strassman. The post-production and sound design were by Gary Fink. Original music was composed by Sam McCallie, Carl Schurtz, Eve Biglarian, and Richard Emmett. Theme music from the Star Trek television series was composed by Alexander Courage and Gene Roddenberry, and used courtesy of Bruin Music. The associate producer was Sloan Seaman. Star Trek: The Ashes of Eden was produced and directed by Carol Shapiro.